Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Mormon Stories Podcast. I'm your host, John DeLynn. It is August 11th, 2021, and today you are in store for a super interesting and compelling Mormon Stories episode. Scout's Honor. I was a Star Scout, so Scout's Honor. Today we have in studio, the short version is Laura Schnell. Hello, Laura. Welcome.
Thank you. Hi, John. Hi, Kara.
You guys would have heard Laura Schnell either mentioned by name or not by name in Marc Oslund's interview, which was an epic Mormon Stories interview. Shout out to Marc. Those of you who are avid followers of Mormon Stories podcast will remember that just a few months ago, we interviewed Marc Oslund, who grew up as a star quarterback and baseball pitcher in Southern California, ended up inexplicably converting to the Mormon Church around age 16, went on to sacrifice his Major League Baseball career to serve a Mormon mission and go attend BYU. And when all those dreams fell apart, he became a Seminary and Institute teacher for the Mormon Church, and then everything fell apart. So that has been one of the most important episodes of 2021, if not of all time. But there's more. While Marc Oslund was teaching Seminary Institute in Utah County, of all places, he met the Laura Schnell. Right, Laura?
Right. Yep.
Yeah. He mentioned you in his episode, right?
He did.
Did he mention you by name or not?
He did not. No, he didn't mention me by name. But what other brown coworker was he going to have?
Female.
Right.
Brown
female
coworker.
Yeah. Yeah. We got hired at the same time, and we quit around the same time, too. So we were together. Not teaching at the same school, but we were together. We knew each other very well and know each other, are really good friends. So. Yeah.
So like following on the tails of that, we just love to interview former Mormon Church employees, current Mormon Church employees, but also former Seminary and Institute teachers, CES employees, along with former bishops, former stake presidents, former Relief Society presidents, because the insider view is what fascinates so many people. But Laura's got an epic story of her own right, born in Colombia, immigrated to the United States with her mom, spent some time in Queens, eventually, became super active in the church, moved to Arizona. And then we're going to learn how what her early years were like, what her teen years were like, and then, what her Mormon life was like prior to BYU, and then becoming a Seminary and Institute teacher. And then we're going to hear about what it's like to be a female woman of color trying to survive in CES, in the Mormon Church education system. We're going to hear an epic story about what she confronted there and where that journey took her. We'll leave you in suspense. Where did that journey take her? Maybe she's still employed by CES. I don't know. We'll have to find out. But hold on to your hats for an epic story. I've read the outline, and it's going to be amazing. And there's more, because, of course, we have Kara Burrell with us as co-host. Hey, Kara.
Oh, hey, John. Hey, Laura. I love when I come in to work in the morning and I'm a little bit tired, and then the guests we start laughing, and I'm like, oh no, you can't tell me that story because we have to wait. So John is not exaggerating that this is going to be good. This is going to be intense. This is going to be good. I'm already laughing and having so much fun already. Like, I cannot wait to get into this. You guys are going to hear some really good stories today.
So excited.
And Kara, I have to say, just as an intro, like your debut interview in lead chair with Kelly Trust. Wait,
we have two Kelly.
I know. I get confused.
We had Kelly Lang and Kelly Trust on.
Kelly Trust, yeah.
In the last few days. This was Kelly Trust.
Tons of good feedback about your debut. I'm not trying to be condescending, but I just want to say nice job, man. Good job.
Yeah. Everyone's been pretty nice.
Yeah.
You said no haters at the end of the podcast, so maybe people are like, oh no,
they felt beat down.
No. And then obviously Kelly was a dream just in terms of her vulnerability and her ability, just putting so much out there, and that was a really fun interview.
Great story.
So if anyone hasn't watched that one yet, go back and watch
after this.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Kara, we're looking forward to having Kara find and take the lead on many more interviews to come. But it takes a little bit to learn how to do this job, right? It's not as easy as it might look, right?
We were just joking, really. Like, I think my first rodeo went pretty well. It's mostly the lighting. I have to get better. I'm mostly over here. I could have interviewed Laura. I could have kicked John over here, but the lighting isn't.
So it's Gerardo's fault that you're not doing this interview, basically.
Yeah, it's also my ability to throw only like, you know, dollar store makeup on my face really quickly. I need to like up all kinds of like just on camera game before I do that. Yeah.
All right, donors, we need a Cara Burrell makeup budget for the Open Stories Foundation. I got it, Cara. Okay, so sorry, Laura, that we took some time out to give some opening.
No, it's perfect.
And by the way, I have to say your full name, and I'm reading it because it's a tiny bit long. But the full name
didn't memorize it?
I did not.
Cara did.
I can try and pretend to. Cara pretended to memorize it. Laura Marcela Garcia Gomez Runyon de Schnell. That is the full name. Did I get it?
You got it. You got
With
it.
the little German emphasis on it.
Yeah.
De Schnell.
De Schnell. That was perfect. Well done.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us, Laura. Super excited for today.
Thank you.
Any additions, corrections you want to make to the intro before we jump into your story?
No, that was perfect. Thank you for saying Colombia and not Colombia, where people think I'm from, here. I'm not. So.
Well, I owe it all to the Mormon Church for sending me on a mission to Guatemala.
Hey, there you go. There you go.
I learned a few things while I was there.
It's awesome.
All right. Well, where does your epic Mormon... I get a sense you weren't born under the covenant.
I thought for the longest time that I had been, until somebody in Young Women's, when I was about, I want to say 14, was like, do you know we were all born under the covenant? And I thought, yeah, me too. No, you weren't. No, my parents were baptized and I was born Mormon. And she was like, no, the covenant means your parents are married in the temple. And I remember, I was like, I wasn't born in the covenant. My mom comforted me. She's really good at that. And anyway, so I was not. Okay. My parents are converts. So
how did it start?
Oh, it's really interesting. My father, who still lives in Colombia, by the way, he was a branch president at the time, and he's 10 years older than my mom. And she was a little college 22-year-old and going through a hard time, just struggling. Her parents were in the middle of a divorce. So anyway, the missionaries knocked on her door. But before they knocked on her door, she had a dream that 2 men were going to come to her door. And so then she opened the door and it was 2 men with a book. And they came in and they said, we have a message for you. But
what do you make of that? Oh, I guess you don't. I don't want to give away the...
No, yeah.
So it was divine somehow.
I've always thought it was really cool that she had that. And, we were always told if we're from the tribe of Manasseh, so that means we're visionaries and everything. So anyway, she opens the door as this very tall white man and this very short Colombian one, and they come in, and the Colombian one actually won't talk. He's like, well, my companion, he has something to tell you. And he was actually, I think he'd been in Colombia maybe half an hour, and he started just bearing his really broken English testimony, and my mom was just, she felt really loved by... She was smitten.
Spiritually smitten.
Spiritually, yeah. She tells the story. She says, I just felt like God cared about me because he said, I know that Heavenly Father loves you. And she had grew up Catholic, never heard, God loves you, but Heavenly Father, it's paternal. I think going through everything with her parents, her dad was absent. It was really the perfect thing for her to feel. And so she got baptized.
Was she raised in like upper class, middle class?
Nope. No, lower. I wouldn't even say middle at all. No, lower class. It's number 6 of 7. So,
urban, rural, like city?
Mix. Yeah. Countryside, not quite downtown city, hustle bustle, but not in a farm. So the between. Okay. So, and then my father, very, very, very poor, like no shoes to school, no food, poor. Okay. And so they come from different backgrounds, similar, different places in the country. But she goes to church and someone says, hey, you're both single. You're both Mormon. You should.
Oh, so your dad was already in the church.
Yeah, he had been baptized before, not before, but prior. And he served a mission, actually.
Oh.
He served a mission without going to the temple, which is so interesting because the only temple.
Isn't there a Colombian temple?
Well, now, yeah.
Oh, okay.
But back when he served in the 70s, no. So which is so interesting. I'm like, did you not wear, no covenant, no garments, just serving. And then they got to go to the temple in Brazil. And so he got to go through and then went back and finished but he served his mission where my mom's from, but they didn't meet. So anyway, he's a branch president. He's a student, accounting, and then they meet and they date and they get married, not in the temple. They didn't get married in the temple because there was no temple in Colombia at the time, but they were always taught to be worthy of a temple recommend and to be worthy and to get married one day.
They couldn't go to Brazil?
No, too expensive. Way too expensive. Yeah. So anyway. And
what was your dad's profession?
Accountant.
Okay, you just said that. Okay,
yeah, so he's an accountant, yeah.
Okay.
So anyway, really struggled a lot. I was born and, not a lot of means and resources there. Faithful tithe payers, though. Faithful. It's funny, there's very few pictures of us. We don't have pictures or anything when we were little because when we moved here, you leave everything. But there's one picture that he scanned and he sent me recently, and my sister and I were just laughing. It's a picture of my mom and him and me. And behind them is a big old picture of Bruce R. McConkie. And I was like, what's McConkie doing in our family pic? And, my mom's like, well, we're so faithful and they really wanted to live up to that covenant family.
He's your godfather. He was your spiritual
he's like,
godfather.
oh my God, he's my godfather.
What's that in Spanish? What is the?
Padrino.
He's your
McConkie el padrino.
He's your padrino espiritual. No?
Please no. I hope not. But maybe. I don't know. Who knows? But anyway, so
you were there until what age?
I was 8. And so they got divorced.
Okay.
So they didn't get to, get sealed. But yeah, till I was 8, my little sister was born. It was actually, it's really interesting. I prayed. That was my first time that I was like, okay, prayer works, because I prayed every day, 3 times a day to get a little sister. And little did I know they were separating already but by some miracle, she was born. And she was actually
a divorce baby.
It was before. So they were struggling, and then she was born, and when we brought her home from the hospital, he was already moved out. So kind of sad, yeah. But she's my best friend. We were really, really tight. So the 3 of us moved here.
And the age difference again? It's
4 years.
Okay.
Yeah. So anyway, yeah. So she always jokes. She's like, no one wanted me, but you and God made a deal. So we brought you down. So anyway, but she's a gift. My mom and my dad hate when she says that. They're like, no, we did want you. Your sister wanted you more though. But anyway, so we move here.
Do you have Mormon memories in Colombia?
Mormon memories? Yeah. Yes, I do. I remember I would go to church I would take turns because I think they were already separated. So I really don't know the details, but I think one would go one week, the other one would go. Same branch though, really small. I remember bearing my testimony every single fast and testimony meeting. I just wanted to bear my testimony all the time. I remember the branch being really small. I remember walking just maybe an hour in the sun, walking to church, an hour there and an hour back. Yeah.
That's commitment.
Yeah, they were committed. Yeah, especially I remember crying because I was thirsty and my father would not stop to get me water. I mean, I'm like 3.5, 4. I still remember bawling, saying, I'm thirsty. This is humid. You've been to Guatemala, so Colombia is very humid, very hot. Yeah. And here I am in this 80s dress. And my dad was like, no, it's Sunday. We don't go to the store. And if you keep crying, you'll be thirstier. So I just stopped crying and we went to church. And I remember the sacrament. I was like, my water. I was so happy. But anyway, small branch.
Savor the teaspoon.
Right. So anyway, Really, really I just remember faithful people, loving, tight-knit, really, really tight-knit, family almost. Always taking care of each other. That's really the memories I have.
When ex-Mormons want, or even evangelical Christians want to say that the Mormon Church just only does bad, I think about the role that it can play in developing countries and elsewhere. Yeah. And it gives me pause because like it's got to be that some community is better than none. Yeah. And that doesn't mean, you know, maybe it fills a vacuum where other things would fill it if the church weren't there. But in your opinion, did you feel like the church was doing good for the people there?
Yeah, I mean, and you know, that's hard because I struggle with making some of these members who are having a hard time paying tithing and having callings. But at the same time, I do sense that it was overall positive for that community. I remember I was best friends with this girl. She was special needs. I don't think I would have known her otherwise. She lived, and because it's a branch, people live far away. You know, it's one branch in Cali, the city where I grew up.
Cali?
Cali.
Wait,
yeah.
that is is that Pablo Escobar territory or?
That's one of the cartels. The Cali cartel is big. Pablo Escobar is in Medellin. So.
Okay.
How do you spell that?
Cali? C-A-L-I. Yeah, just like California when people say Cali. Oh. Yeah.
Okay, so I don't even know my drug cartels, but the
just know
the
there's
Cali
one in
cartel
Cali
is different than Pablo Escobar's.
Yeah.
I was gonna, and I hate to do this, but I'm going to do it anyway.
Go for it.
A lot of us who grew up in the '80s, when we think of Colombia, we think about Pablo Escobar and cocaine and the drug trade. Was any of that even in your consciousness while you were there growing up? Did it affect your parents at all?
Absolutely.
Do you even know?
Absolutely.
Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah. So I love talking to my mom about it. I was young. So I was born in '89 and the Escobar fiasco turned a corner in '94. My sister was already born too. And overall, just general anxiety all the time, which is why it's a great question. It actually leads to why the church played a part in healing. And maybe even if it didn't heal, it created like a sanctuary. Like, hey, we're safe here. Let's have faith. Let's pray together. Let's rely on each other. The government was just insane. My mom remembers, my father, I call him my father. I don't know why he thought it was a good idea to speak out. And he was actually
against the drug cartels.
He just because it was government mixed with cartel, mixed with everything, and he was an accountant, and so he dealt with some government officials, and he decided to speak out, and he was actually kidnapped. So I do remember picking him up, and I remember him holding his wrists because his wrists were swollen from being tied. But they didn't really talk about it. Now that I ask him, he was like, oh yeah, this and this and this. But my mom remembers, I mean, people would run for president and then be shot in the street. My mom remembers she was really, really hoping for this one. His name was Galan. And he was in the middle of a speech, and he said, we're going to change this. We're going to change Colombia, and just gunned down by one of Pablo's men. And she says it was so much anxiety, and you felt like you didn't know who to trust. You didn't know how much to say. You didn't know where to go. And on top of that, the economy was, because these people were monopolizing the money and where the economy was going. And so anyway, it was, and that led to us leaving eventually.
So that was
so much unrest.
That was a factor.
Yeah, it was a factor. So much lack of work and lack of opportunity. So, I mean, in Colombia, the media is owned by 3 or 4 families. And this was, and I'm speaking based on myself in 2008 when I talked to one Colombian official, and she said, oh yeah, it's so monopolized. We hope things are better now. There's some unrest still, but anyway, that led to the immigration of our family. So
I always ask this, so I have to ask you, do you remember any primary songs growing up in Colombia?
Yes, I do. And actually, my favorite primary song of all time, it's in Spanish. That's all I know it in. I remember moving here and hearing English primary, and I was like, I don't like this. Spanish primary, way better. But it is how does it go? What's the title? The flowers and the birds. Cuando oigo feliz, un ave cantar. My Heavenly Father loves me. There it is. That one.
Whenever I hear the sound of a bird, or look at the blue, blue sky.
Yeah.
What is it in Spanish?
Mi Padre Celestial me ama. Cuando oigo feliz un ave cantar. Seriously, that was my go-to. Yeah.
I keep singing. Why did you stop?
Yeah, exactly.
Was this a concert? I remember the lady who taught me that like it was yesterday. She was an angel. She was this older single lady who was in charge of primary. And I still remember one of my fondest memories was this little boy ripping off his shirt. And he said, I hate God. And she would like hold him. I mean, you would think like discipline. And I still remember after she held him, she was like, no, you don't. You're his child. And he was like, no, I am Satan's child. And she kept holding him. And I was like, man. But I remember as a 4-year-old watching such love from this primary woman and her teaching us and her holding my hand as I would color, and really fond memories of primary. But
so this is a test. Do you remember Mis dientes no me lavaré, un niño exclamó? Do you remember that?
No, I don't remember that.
So the Spanish hymnal used to have a song about brushing your teeth.
Really?
Yeah. It also had Mi querido Santa Claus, ven a escuchar. So it had these primary songs that the U.S. Ones didn't.
Really?
Yeah.
I wish I knew. I wish I knew the dientes one. The Santa Claus one sounds familiar.
Yeah. Okay.
That's funny.
All right. Then I don't believe you actually lived in Latin America.
Right.
So you failed the test.
I failed the dientes test.
You just read a Wikipedia article about Escobar. I guarantee it.
Right. You made
Kara's
it up.
like, who's this Escobar person? Okay. All right. So your mom decided to make a leap, and that's a big deal, right?
Huge deal. Yeah. I still don't know.
Not everyone can even do that if they want to, right?
No. And my mom is such a faithful, when I say faithful, I don't just mean faithful to the church, but just a filled with faith person, where she really does believe that that things work out and that God's aware. And my grandma was already living in New York. She had left.
Nueva York.
In Nueva York, yeah. And she was like, Ben. And my mom was like, I still remember her asking, she was like, do you want to move to America? And I was like, no, I like it here. But that was hard. But
Michael Jackson.
Yeah, right. Michael Jackson. I didn't speak any English. That was terrible. But she kept asking us, and I didn't know at the time. Now I do. But she said she fasted all the time, constantly fasting and praying, and couldn't go to the temple, but trying to be faithful. And someone was like, just go get your visas. Just go to Bogota, which is the capital, get in line. It's really hard, but just go for it. So I still remember she went, and she's in line, and she's seeing people get turned down. And when you get turned down, and by the way, a lot of people in her family have been turned down. It's not easy to get a visa. Why would a country want you to leave? So she watched people, and this is in the surge of immigration, but still, she watched people get turned down. No, and come back in 7 to 10 years. And so she's just holding her breath. And you go through, there's several stops. You don't go inside a building and sit down. You stop. There's like a booth for a first person to check. Like, okay, let's see if your situation, if it's legit, you go inside and you sit down with an official, they stamp, whatever. If it's rejected, you don't even come inside. You're like out, you're done. So she was waiting in line, and it's her turn, and she remembers people telling her, you cannot tell them the truth, okay? You can't. You have to lie. Why would you tell them the truth? If they ask you, do you have land in Colombia? Yes, I do. Are you planning on coming back? Yes, I am, right? Do you have a home? Yes, I do. Which, by the way, we're all no for her. And so she's in line, and she tells me, she's like, I had to be honest. And so the man says, do you have land in Colombia? And she says, no, I don't. We have not. I'm going through a divorce. Okay. Do you have a home? No, I don't. I don't have a house. We have an apartment. Okay. Are you planning on coming back to Colombia? And she says, nope, I'm not. I want to take my 2 daughters and I want to go. And the man, he pulls out 3 visas. He figures it all out, and he looks at her and he says, take this and go. Don't ask questions, just go. So she left. I got baptized first. That was my thing. I got to get baptized in Colombia by my father. And then in December, we left.
Wow, what a miracle.
Crazy.
So any lesson on honesty for the rest of your mom's life?
Right.
She tells that story.
Oh, anytime, yeah. And for us, for our lives, you know.
Be honest.
Yeah, be honest. Tell the truth. Yeah. So
that's great.
Yeah. So
it's a great story.
Lots of miracles, though. I mean, she always tells me, she says, you know, God is a God of miracles, and so it's something that has been part of my narrative.
I bet,
my whole life. So anyway,
we can come back to that, but I mean, part of me wants to say what a miracle, and then part of me wants to think, what about everybody else? You know, did Heavenly Father not love them? You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's really interesting. Yeah.
Or like whoever was giving out visas, it was like his last day, and he was just like F the system and just wanted to give everybody visas because he's like, I'm quitting. That happened once when I was at a pizza place, and the guy just gave everybody free cookies because he said I just got fired, and gave everyone free cookies in the pizza place.
That's amazing.
Maybe that was it.
Maybe
that's my miracle story.
That's not as fun of a story.
You don't think? I feel like it has the same emotions.
It's not as inspiring. It's not as inspiring.
But close. Or he. I mean, really, and we'll come back to it. But for me, I'm like, or humanity. I mean, this man maybe felt something when he saw this woman and.
So it's not God. It's just like this man was kind.
Right. And so
I believe in that all day long. Gorgeous. Yeah.
Yeah. Gorgeous. It is. So anyway.
So you made the jump.
Yeah, we make it. And it's horrible. New York City in December is horrendously cold. And we had nothing. We had one suitcase each. I didn't even get to bring
What year was this?
97.
Okay.
Yeah. December 1997. December 19th.
Okay.
My sister turned 4 a week or so later. I had turned 8 in September, got baptized, and then came. And here we are. My father came, and then he said bye and left. So that was hard. Now I do. At the time, I just thought he doesn't want to be with us, but now I do. Way too hard for him. He was like, I am not moving to the U.S. He was stubborn. He's a stubborn one, but that's essentially why he's like, nope, I'm not uprooting. I'm going to miss my family. I think it broke his heart into a million pieces, but he was not going to try to make a life here. So anyway, and my mom said, fine. Okay. Wow. I am, because I want the girls to grow up with opportunity.
Holy moly.
So anyway.
That's kind of super cool and tragic.
Yeah, both. I know. So anyway, we're here and we spend Christmas together and we find the branch. The first thing we do is we find that Richmond Hill 3 branch.
In Queens?
In Queens. Amazing. The most amazing little branch. So,
we have a super devout listener who lives in Queens. And
really?
She texts me. She DMs me on Instagram.
Really?
So I have to give a shout out to my listener in Queens.
Queens.
I assume there might be more than one, but there's at least one.
There you go. Yeah. Queens. So anyway, and that's important later on. But yeah, we love the branch, but life is hard because you don't just, the American dream. I don't know if Kara wants to chime in with, we were talking about before, we were talking about Kara's really smart with ideals and, it's
what's it like to be an immigrant, Kara?
It's not, what's it like? It's not. Seriously?
I cannot believe.
Tell us what it's like to be a person of color, Kara. We want to hear.
Now everyone's going to be like, oh gosh.
Okay, but
this is sarcasm. Everyone, my gosh.
But it's so cool to talk to someone my age who gets it. For the most part, people my age who are white are like, oh, but when talking to Kara for, the while before we started, I was like, oh, this person understands, like the empathy there of the not confused look when I say, it's not what they tell you. So,
it's not a party.
It's not a party. And it's not like, congratulations, you're here.
What's it like?
It's you're thrown in and learn the language quick, figure it out. My mom, where do I work? I'm undocumented. I have a visa, and one of the hardest things for me with illegal immigrations, I'm very passionate about it, but it's, people do it the right way. And it's like, sure, like me, I did it the right way. I came with a visa. Colombia is an ocean away, so I wasn't going to swim it, but I flew, But what happens when your visa is expired? Well, that's the same thing. And so you don't it's just the means and the resources. It's hard. It's tough. It's really, really hard. So my mom just hopped to it. Okay, working whatever I can find and anything. Cleaning toilets in the airport where she met Tiger Woods and Shakira, by the way.
So literally cleaning toilets.
Literally cleaning toilets in there. Would bring us back Milano cookies. I have a bond with Milanos. If anyone's listening wants to ship me Milanos, you're my best friend. You know the little
Pepperidge Farm?
Yeah.
Milano cookies?
Milano cookies, yeah. She would bring us home and we would be so happy.
Gift for Laura. Write that down, Kara.
So working a lot. We lived in this basement where my sister and I talk about it. We shared a bed. The three of us shared a bed.
3 in a bed.
3 in a bed. Yep. I didn't have my own. I didn't have my own room until I was in my 20s in college. And
your mom and her 2 daughters.
Her 2 daughters shared a bed.
Wow.
Yeah. And I would take care of my sister. She would leave us a note. We would pray every morning. She would leave really early and leave us a note. You know, she would say, hey, the breakfast is on the stove. Feed yourself, feed your sister, get dressed, walk her. And then I would take the public city bus to school.
At 8?
Well, this was, okay, I'm thinking public is 7th grade. But like in the beginning, yeah, I just would walk to school. My great-grandma lives in New York too, but she had a hard time. I mean, she was older. She couldn't. And after a while, I told my mom, I was like, I don't want to be at her house anymore. So anyway, at her apartment, we're all in little apartments.
Did you kind of have to grow up early then?
Yes, very. And I was always told, you're the oldest, you're responsible. You have to take care of your sister. You have to be a good example. So I was very, very aware very early on about things.
I've been in New York a few times. Like, I sometimes am afraid. Well, it's hard to navigate the city, and I'm afraid. And I'm this big, huge, white guy. What's it like to be a 8-year-old Spanish-speaking immigrant trying to navigate the streets of Queens? Do you remember what it felt like?
What's interesting about that is I think because I am Latina, it feels different. There's so much diversity in Queens. So I didn't find all the Colombians, but I found Dominicans and I found Puerto Ricans and Indians and Guyanese people. And
they look kind of...
And we all kind of felt, I didn't really see at my junior high and in elementary, not a ton of white kids. And so that part, I was like, okay, it's still foreign. I'd never in my life seen an Indian person, right? Or Dominicans, but it felt like, okay, you speak Spanish? Yeah. And so it was interesting that way.
It reminds me of In the Heights. I don't know if you've seen that.
Oh, I'm dying to.
You haven't seen it?
No, my sister's begging me to. I need to.
Okay, it's a great. Lin-Manuel Miranda, the creator of Hamilton, just came out with his first musical for the big screen. Yeah. In the Heights? In the Heights, yeah. And it talks about what a local barrio or whatever in New York can be like for the people who live there.
Yeah, yeah. And
check it out if you feel like it.
I'm going to.
Okay.
But yeah, so it felt like that. Sometimes it was a little bit intimidating. In Colombia, when you come from a country, you're used to the language and the culture. And so here, things are still different. There's still, the streets of New York aren't, it's different. So my mom would say, be very careful, be always aware. There's always older people around me. And in 7th grade, I rode the actual public bus
That's still amazing.
With grown-ups to school. So, because I went to school in Brooklyn. So, anyway, junior high in Brooklyn.
Okay. Why?
So, that was just I don't know, honestly. I want to say it was the closest one. There must have been one in Queens, but that's just the one I went to. It was just a half an hour on the public bus. So with my Metro card, if you remember those.
Yeah.
So anyway, yeah. So the hardest part was English, honestly. I developed a lot of anxiety just because I didn't understand, and math already sucks, but math in English is really bad. So from a younger age, I kind of was like, oh, I'm just not that smart. I kind of believed that I'm not smart. And so, interestingly enough, all my teachers were white in New York. Maybe I had one teacher of color. So that was interesting. I'd never had that. And I feel like Sometimes it was good. Sometimes it was not good. Like the math teacher in particular ridiculed me quite a bit for not understanding. But for the most part, really great teachers who had been around children of color all their lives. And so it was good and bad. So anyway, but I learned English. I made it. And my little sister learned English in like 3 months because she was home still. She was only 4. And my mom didn't know, but my grandma would just turn on the TV for 6 hours a day. And so 3 months later, my sister was just blabbing. And my mom's like, oh, well, she's ready. So anyway, but the 3 of us were really, really tight. And my mom, we wouldn't see her. She would come home late. And that was it. Church. Sometimes she couldn't go to church. She was working. So we were taken on by this beautiful family, Mexican family. Mexicans have a special place in my heart because of this family. They just took us in and would take and feed us. And again, my mom would say that the church was there for us. And I say, yeah, the people were there for us. These human beings who just loved us, you know. So New York was the growing pains for the 3 of us, but probably mostly for my mom. But my sister and I grew as little girls there. So anyway. Any
memories from the branch you want to share?
So, yeah.
What was it called again, the branch?
Richmond Hill 3.
Okay.
Yeah. Richmond Hill 3. And they just amazing people, similar to Colombia, actually. Very tight-knit. My mom was made the Relief Society president, which I was like, why would you do that? She works 3 jobs, but she loved it. She was great. She was single though, so and she's very beautiful and young. I mean, my mom was my age now when she moved to the US by herself.
Isn't that crazy?
I couldn't.
You do that. You make that awareness.
I can't. Yeah, when it hits you. Yeah. So a lot of men, you know, hermana, you know, but she was pretty. She was. Hey, I'm here working for my girls. I'm not here to find love or whatever. So anyway.
Wow. Focused.
Yeah, very focused. We were there during 9/11, so that was crazy.
Whoa. What do you remember about that?
Oh, I remember it like it was yesterday because it was, my little sister was evacuated, which I'm offended I wasn't. They kept us in school. But I remember my principal running in and he was white. He looked like a ghost. And he ran in and he said, hey, I need anyone right now whose parents work in the World Trade Center. Come follow me. Just come outside the door. And a couple of my classmates stood up and they were just about to be told that their parents were killed. I never did see those classmates again, actually. I don't remember what happened. It's fuzzy. I don't remember they were transferred. Maybe, I don't know. But it was it was a morbid, terrible day. And Queens is I want to say 45 minutes away, but my mom was nowhere to be found. I knew her. I remember I had a stomach ache because my mom, I knew her train went through that because I know she worked by Manhattan. So I remember thinking, is she okay?
Oh, so she was working close to downtown.
Yeah. And she watched one of the towers fall. The subway just froze. She's trampled. I mean, just everyone just running out. She walked home, and so she came home at like 11 p.m. covered in dust, crazy day. But September 12th was actually the day that stays in my mind the most because it was just quiet. New York is never quiet, and September 12th was just death march, just nothing. So.
Do you remember the smoke or, any of that stuff? Or?
I only remember the emotional things because I remember watching. I mean, it was 8:30. I remember it was 8:30. My principal came in the morning. School was not normal after that day. It was just news and news. And we just went from class to class, news, nothing, just the tragedy. Then I went home and stayed with my sister and waited till my mom got home, hoping she was okay. And she was. So,
wow.
But crazy day. But yeah, that's New York.
That is New York.
Yeah, those are my memories. And then, then my mom met a love interest. So, so things changed there. So
how did she meet him?
Anyway.
Did you do youth program?
I did. Girls camp was in New York.
What?
So yeah. I was in Young Women's in New York, and the Mexican family that took us in, she was a Young Women's president. So
you literally live with this Mexican family?
No.
Okay, they were just
and by that I mean,
yeah,
and we would spend nights and days in a row, especially in the summertime when my mom worked and we were out of school. Okay. So anyway.
But you went to girls' camp?
Yeah, went to girls' camp. Yeah, loved it. I thought it was, I hated being away from my mom. I cried a lot. I was a mommy's girl. I still am, actually. And so that was hard. But yeah, I loved it. And there were 3 young women. So
When you're in like the inner city though, right? Like what do you do for your girls' camp?
So great. Such a good question. We had a bus and we went to upstate New York.
Catskills, or what was it called up there?
I wish I knew, honestly, but super pretty. I'd never been camping. I was like, why do people do this? But I didn't like it, but I liked being with the people. And I remember the young women's camp director was so cool, like this cool white lady who spoke Spanish and who made us feel welcome. That's always the problem with, I think, with stakes, and then you have your appendage Spanish branches. There's never, but I felt connected, so I liked it, and I liked her. So anyway,
did you do seminary?
No,
in New York, in Queens.
No.
Okay.
I left before. So
do you remember your testimony growing there at all, or?
Yes, I do. Do you remember Bruce R. McConkie and our family picture in Colombia? Well, in New
your
York.
Padrino?
Yeah,
Padrino spiritual.
It's gonna be the worst joke of all. It's gonna be my nightmare. I'm just gonna wake up.
Marc Oslund, you need to make a meme of Bruce R. McConkie as Godfather that says Padrino spiritual, and then it's got a picture of Laura like dreamy or something.
Yeah, thank you. But
thank you,
seriously though, that was New York. We had the prophet and the 2, his 2 counselors up on our bedroom wall, because my mom said we faithful God, he will help us. And my mom was told repeatedly, and I remember hearing this, but hey, hermana, like you don't have a husband, so the priesthood is not in your home. So you need to be faithful because the priesthood is not in your home, and Jesus is like your husband. I remember it being like, what? When I was little, that just didn't add up. But I think spiritually it was well-meaning, like, hey, the Savior's here, but you don't have the priesthood, so be faithful to maintain that power. So anyway.
Well, it's almost a contradictory message of like, you've got people protecting you and guiding you, but the full power isn't with you. It's
yes,
kind of weird.
Yeah, it's a little, I remember I didn't let myself feel frustration, but I remember being sick and being like, we have to call blah, blah, blah. We have to call el Señor, or we have to call el hermano. But the missionaries, they came every Monday. The missionaries were our best friends. We loved them. They were awesome. And we actually keep in touch with some of them to this day.
Nice.
Yeah, I was going to ask that. I bet that would be like a really good lifelong bond that you create there.
Yeah. And there's actually there's 2 of them that personally text me still. And they're like, I remember you, and you were such a, cute little 12-year-old girl. And anyway, so they were a big deal for us in New York because for some reason, they understood. I don't know why. It's 19-year-old, or maybe, 19 boys from Arizona, from Idaho, from Utah. And they just had this love for the single mom and these 2 little girls. And anyway, they would bring us, I remember one time they brought us groceries, and I remember checking the cupboards, so much anxiety as a 10-year-old. And my mom would say, it's okay, God will provide. I know we don't have food, but God will provide. And she would pay her tithing faithfully. And I remember watching her count the cash and putting it in an envelope and saying, this one's for the Lord and this one's for us. And I was like, but we need the extra. I remember thinking like, oh, well, how about we take $10 from God and we put it in our envelope? And she was like, no. So very faithful. But I think the missionaries understood that. And now that I'm an adult, I'm like, well, of course, they probably talked about us in ward council, and they said, hey, this family's struggling. I don't know, maybe. I didn't serve a mission, so I'm not sure. But they brought us groceries. And I remember thinking, the missionaries, they're so spiritual. They're so in tune. They understand, and also God. And so my testimony was just that. And New York is what solidified my testimony in God and in missionaries and in miracles and in obedience. Perfect obedience always brings blessings. So anyway.
I mean, it's hard to argue that, your family kind of lifted itself up, and that these Mormon families and the Rama, you know, they were all a part of that, right?
Yeah, they were a huge part of that. And so, yeah, it's...
We'll talk about, I guess we can come back to that.
We'll come back. Yeah, we'll come back. I know, I'm like, how much do I say?
No, yeah.
But yeah, so anyway, one of the missionaries, and that's why they're important, is one of them. He was, I remember, he was from Arizona, and he fell in love with one of the young women in our ward. You know, there's like, and that's like the biggest, and that's very stereotypical, but you kind of grew up with this unsaid, if you're a young Latina and you're like, hey, if you can marry a white Mormon returned missionary, you have made it. That was kind of the unsaid thing. So we were all like, oh my goodness, she's getting married to Elder so-and-so. And we were she was 18. It's not like she was 15 or anything. She was 18, which doesn't make me feel a lot better, but she was 18. He was young, 21. He came back, she was 19, and they got married. And his best man is my dad. So his best man, just this young, just handsome guy, divorced, 2 girls. He comes and I still remember this to this day. I was sleeping at our Mexican friend's house. Her name is Jolie's, and they said, let's go to this party. Let's go to Carla's party, her wedding party. And my mom's like, I can't, I have to work. And for some reason, she got the day off. I don't know what happened. I remember being asleep, and my mom woke me up, and she said, I'll be home at, 4 or 5 a.m., Latin parties. Even the branch, the Rama, the parties at the Rama, I remember spending the night in the church. It was 4 or 5 when everyone would go home. You just dance and you party.
Wow.
So, yeah, that didn't...
You know how to party.
They sure do. Yeah, the poor missionaries, they would just stand and wave and leave because they couldn't dance. But
Guatemala, they called it a pachanga. That's like a big party.
Yes, a pachanga. Yeah, parranda, pachanga, totally. So anyway, she was like, I'm going to Carla's wedding party. I'll be back. And I know that means 5 a.m. Anyway,
wow.
She met him there. So
best man.
The best man, yeah. And he came over, I met him. I remember my little sister, we were in church the next day, the following day, and he kept looking at us. And my sister was like, there's a white man keeps looking at us. And I remember being like, I see him. And then afterwards, my mom said, girls, this is, and my mom did not speak English and he did not speak Spanish. So in Spanish, she
Your
said,
mom hadn't learned English.
No.
Oh, wow.
No.
Because there'd be no way.
There's no time.
She's too busy working.
Yeah, she's too busy working. Yeah.
And her ward is all Spanish speaking.
Exactly.
The community.
Yeah, we spoke English.
Because of school.
Yeah, because of school. So she's like, this is Mike. And we were just smiling and he was smiling and
did he speak Spanish? You said he...
Nope.
Neither of them spoke Spanish?
Neither of them. No. So the law of attraction was strong. So anyway, I guess she asked him to dance and he said yes. And they danced and... The rest is history. Yep.
And his hips didn't lie.
His hips did not lie. Exactly.
I have to ask this. This is a total adjacent comment.
Yeah.
What were you taught about being a Lamanite and your skin color and whiteness up until that point? And if there's nothing, then nothing. I just want to check in about the Book of Mormon, the Lamanite doctrine, your skin, because you mentioned white savior, missionaries from Arizona, and then your people of color, intermarriage.
Yeah. It's interesting because I didn't learn enough about the Lamanites being us and there being a difference until I attended English-speaking wards. When there was more of this is us and this is them. But because in New York, it was like, I remember it vaguely. We're the descendants of the Nephites. That's us. I remember that being said over the pulpit. I remember being taught that, the Nephites and the Lamanites. And anytime anyone was like, but the Lamanites are dark like we are. And they would say but then they became righteous. So that's still us, so it was always, that's us. That's who we are. Most, but not all, most Latinos are from the tribe of Manasseh. Not all.
According to Mormonism.
According to Mormonism. So whatever that means, at the time it meant, Manasseh, that's Lehi, that's Nephi. So that meant that was a big deal. We felt, okay, this is us. This is our people. So.
And just so listeners who have no idea what we're talking about, when you get a patriarchal blessing in Mormonism, it's this blessing that this usually old man in your stake gives you. It's kind of like fortune telling or tarot card reading, where he'll put his hands on your head and then dictate a blessing that's supposedly from God. And because Joseph Smith was super into lineage and Israelites and the pure blood of the Jews, and because the Book of Mormon taught, because of the mound builder myth that Joseph Smith absorbed, that Native Americans were actually literal descendants of the 12 tribes of Israel, one of the things you received in that patriarchal blessing when you're 12 or 16 or whatever, is your lineage declared. And so white people got their lineage declared as being from the tribe of Ephraim, as one of the 2 non-lost tribes of Israel, I'm guessing. And then the other option was Manasseh. And so people of color would be told in their patriarchal blessings that they were of the tribe of Manasseh. I'm sure in some way that's super racist, but you thought that was cool.
I thought it was cool, yeah. Not till later, not till I'm in seminary, where I learned the responsibilities. That's when I start being like, wait a minute. Wait, it seems like Manasseh's, what? The birthright was to Ephraim. So it felt off. But at the time, in my 12-year-old mind, I was like, no, this is cool. I am a descendant of the righteous Lamanites. The end.
You were kind of pure blood of Israel.
Yeah. The people who buried their weapons, that's me. That's my people. And so it felt very real. My mom has a very strong testimony of the Book of Mormon. And so it was very important growing up. The Bible, I'm still really shaky on it. The Book of Mormon was it. So, and it was her way, I think, of shedding the Catholicism. It was her way of saying, no, I'm Mormon now, and this is our scripture. She still values and loves the Bible, but Book of Mormon came first. So,
but you thought of yourself as a Lamanite.
Yeah.
A Lamanita,
I did, a Lamanita, but righteous. Los Lamanitas, pero buenos. Right?
Pero buenos.
Los buenos, yeah, no los malos. But so, yeah, I did.
And this idea that came through like Spencer W. Kimball, but probably came through Joseph Smith, or is in the scriptures, that the Lamanites will blossom as a rose and become white and delightsome. When you mentioned some of the Queen's young women marrying the white Utah or Arizona or Idaho, was there any of that, like skin color? We just did a really powerful and important episode with like Sarah Newcomb and Monica and Ann about Native Americans and just how they were vexed by the dark skin and the promise that they would eventually become white and delightsome if they were righteous. Mm-hmm. Was there any of that as you thought about kind of marrying potentially white Mormon missionaries?
Yeah.
and skin lightening at all, or was that not part of your narrative?
What's interesting is it's part of the social construct with Latinos in general. And I don't want to speak for all Latinos. I don't represent the entire diaspora, but I represent me.
Yeah.
I do.
Kara does.
She's an immigrant. She's a person of color. She represents the diaspora. Thank you, Kara. Did
Sarcasm.
you just let Kara talk?
Sarcasm.
All right, Kara, it's time to go ahead, Kara.
Yeah.
I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Okay. We're totally trying to make a joke of obnoxious white people, basically. Okay.
No, it's awesome.
Continue.
So, yeah, okay, I straightened my hair ever since I was 9 years old. Chemically straightened, relaxed. And it was like this thing, growing up, like don't be in the sun too long, because white is the beauty standard. I wanted to look like Kara growing up. I wanted to. Because
did you straighten your hair with those chemicals that burn your scalp?
Yeah, 9 years old. Yeah, yeah. Every 6 months or so. And so I wanted to be this person, this white person, and because white was the beauty standard. So not only, so to hear it sometimes in Mormonism, it was a little bit like, yeah, of course. It wasn't like, that seems to be exclusive, that seems to be racist. It was like, no, of course, because white is beautiful. Like you want white. So
and was that just a U.S. thing, not just a Mormon thing, or was it Mormon influenced?
No, the Mormon influence.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm just saying when I felt those inklings in Mormonism, like, oh, white and delightsome, I didn't think, not like me. I thought, yeah, that's what I could be. That's what I should be. That's what I can hopefully become. And, there's this thing in Colombia, we say it's pretty terrible, but it's atrasar la raza, which is atrasar is to bring back. So if we were to marry someone of our same skin color, you know, and sometimes if we had crushes on dark boys, you know, our aunts would say, that would atrasar la raza. Like
bring back
that
the race.
Would bring, yeah. She's like
like what? Translate that.
Atrasar is like when, like you wind back a clock and so it's like, no, the opposite of progress. So you want to marry white because then there's progress, right? Then your kids are less dark than you and your children. Wow. Yeah. In fact, my daughter her hair is not like mine. She is half white. And my aunt the other day, bless her, this is so internalized racism for her, but she said, I'm so glad her hair didn't turn out like yours. I was like, see, because it didn't, because her father's white and I'm not. So anyway, so it's that idea of like, we want to beautify our race. So I already had that social construct. And so plus the Mormonism, white and delightsome, it all made sense that this was my goal. And so I early
That's
on,
kind of self-loathing, isn't it?
Oh yeah. Early on, I just didn't have a healthy, and again, and it always breaks my mom's heart when she's like, but I never, because my mom did. She always was like, you're beautiful, you know. But you hear the messages everywhere, and I heard them everywhere. And so, what was I supposed to do as a 9-year-old? I didn't have the ability to critically say, no, that's a social construct. You know, I just believed it. I'm just not as good as white. That's okay. But one day I might be. So
I'm so sorry.
That's kind. Thank you. But anyway, so that...
I feel like I want to apologize. I don't know who you're apologizing for.
Okay.
But.
That's okay. But it's taken a long time to heal and grow. And I'm still processing a lot. The fact that I'm wearing my hair down, just so you know, is big. Even a year ago, this is my sisters talking.
When you say wearing it down, what do you
wearing
mean?
it, not constrained, pulled back, because when
like in a ponytail?
Yeah. Or like it's too big. It's too curly. It's too whatever. And so it was always like, no, you want to hide that. You want to be, I don't know.
More white?
More white. Yeah. Classier. I don't know.
Oh,
so anyway.
That's killing me.
I know. It's hard. It's hard to unlearn. It really is. But it didn't help to be in a white religion. I will say that. It should have. But anyway, no.
Absolutely beautiful.
A compliment for my hair. It's not taken the wrong way.
We can say that?
You can say that.
Your hair's beautiful.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay. So anyway, but there was always that, because the Lamanites were so righteous. And remember in the end of the Book of Mormon, though, they did beat the Nephites. They were more righteous than the Nephites. So I kind of held out, like, it's okay because I'm righteous. If I'm righteous inside, it doesn't matter that I'm not as white, because I'll be white inside. I don't know if that makes any sense. I'm white and delightsome inside by being so spiritual. So.
Okay, Kara, this is a TikTok.
Gosh, yeah. These are a lot of the same themes that when we had that panel of Native American women the other day, everyone should probably go watch that. It was just these intense stories, one after another, that's the type of, dynamic that a lot of people from, Native American to Latin America and all over have been just...
Like women rubbing lemon on their skin as a habit.
And the point is...
Because the lemon might make the skin lighter. These are Native American women.
Yeah, and that's frustrating is there's this just enormous amount of gaslighting, I guess, maybe, if that's the right word, where people come on the podcast, they're telling the stories that they grew up with. These are the ideas that were put in their head growing up, and then there'll just be so much spin from whether it's apologists or just a lot of Mormons generally
saying
not racist.
That we don't teach those
that
things.
We've never taught those things. And I was like, well, these are technically their lived experiences and the messages they got. Like, let them speak authentically to what they experienced and what they thought about their own skin.
Thank you for saying that.
And let's listen.
Yeah, because that's a big one that I struggle with. Is, and I'm like, did I make that up? Was I overly sensitive? But the lemon thing, in Colombia, I remember if you put lemon in your eyes, they might turn blue. And I remember begging my babysitter, I'm like, please do it. I'll hold still. And she was like, no, I'm not going to. I was like, please. It might. And she was like, no, I think you have to be younger for it to work. So I don't, it
calls your parents. Don't think can you come home, your kid?
She wants me to put lemon in her eyes. Yeah. So just little things like that, that I am very, very aware that I do not want my daughter, who by the way is very Latina looking, to not have to deal with. So
thank you for sharing that.
Anyway,
thank you. I think that's a good insight for me, just blonde-haired white Provo girl. Tell me all you know. We're listening and learning on this podcast today.
You.
Yeah,
hey, no,
thank you.
Of course.
Okay, so your mom finds that white guy.
Finds the white guy.
Finds that white guy.
Honestly,
white Mormon.
The white Mormon.
RM.
Yeah, no.
Not an RM.
No.
Uh-oh.
No, yeah. Ooh. Yeah. A little edgy on the edge.
Spicy.
I love him. I know. He is just the most fantastic person, my dad. I call him dad. Okay. Raised as father figure. We've been without one for a long time. We moved to Arizona, and that's where it's exacerbated, this whiteness obsession. Because Arizona, and we lived in Prescott. If you know anything about Prescott, Arizona, it's just the whitest place you could be. And then we moved to Gilbert, which my husband calls Utah South. Yeah, my husband calls it that. So, yeah.
I call it Provo, Arizona.
You could Provo, Arizona. Yeah. There you go.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sorry, Kara.
Sorry. I used to live in Mesa. I get it.
Oh, you do? Mm-hmm. Oh, man. Yeah, no. So that was White Ward's, English ward, because he didn't speak Spanish. And so it was kind of the sacrifice there. My mom was like, okay, let's go to the White Ward. They still, by the way, couldn't communicate.
Oh my gosh. So your mom is going to eventually a Gilbert or whatever Arizona white ward, not speaking English yet.
Yes, not speaking English. No. So.
What a culture shock.
I know.
Another culture shock.
Yeah. Amongst many, yeah. But
at least in Queens, she was surrounded by Latinos or Latinas, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. And I will mention they were married in the temple, though.
Okay.
So my mom and dad. So, nice. But that still didn't make us covenant kids, by the way. Right. So my sister and I were like, man. But anyway, they got married. We moved to Arizona. School there. School was so hard there. Junior high was brutal.
All white kids?
Yeah.
Mostly white kids?
Yeah, mostly white kids. Yeah. And the white wards were nice. I mean, hey, welcome to our ward. So nice. Not as warm, not as like huggy or anything. So that was something to get used to. Is we're like, oh, why don't they, like wave and smile? They just kind of like walk by and kind of whisper. A lot more reverence, which we weren't used to.
Their parties don't go till 5 a.m.
Their parties don't go.
Don't go.
Parties don't go. So, yeah. So it's literally like so different.
Latino wards and branches are different than white.
So different. Yeah.
It's almost a different church.
Yeah.
In some ways.
Yeah. And everyone can sing. Oh my goodness. We're like, white people can sing. They all sound so good. And they just are in tune and they sound, so professional.
Harmony.
Yeah. And just a different world, But still, hey, same place, testimony. A lot more, though, I started noticing later on, a lot more Lamanite, Nephite stuff, where I was like, okay. One time, this lady, she asked my mom, and that's in here, but she said, okay, well, do you think after they die and after the resurrection, they will be returned to the white delightsomeness? Do you think they will be white because they're not white right now? And I think my mom just kind of stared at her and was like, no, I don't think that. I think my daughters are, brown and beautiful, and that's how they're meant to be. But I remember that experience was really, it was just kind of traumatizing, honestly. It just made me feel like, okay, is this what everyone in this ward thinks is going to happen or hoping will happen to my sister and I? Just really off, really, really off. So that was the first time that I ever kind of stepped outside myself and was like, okay, This isn't in my head. Someone just verbalized this and asked if I would be white in the next life. So I like to joke with my husband. I'm like, no, just be ready. I'll just be blonde, blue-eyed. You won't know who you're waking up next to. But it's just, it doesn't make sense, you know? So, but we did go to one ward that was, and all the wards I will say were really kind, really friendly. We did go to one that was especially loving, where the young women leaders were very, at least I felt very equal, you know, and I was given callings. I was, you know, made to feel special. I did feel really special. I had a strong testimony, and I was always told, like, you're so faithful. Your testimony is so strong. It makes you so bright, and, you know, you have so much light. And so that's when I kind of switched gears, and I was like, fine, kind of that thing earlier when I was a little girl. I was like, if I can't be white, I will be very white on the inside in all things, but especially spiritually, because white people are very spiritual. Because I saw them, and like mission presidents are white, and stake presidents, you know, and I saw that. Because in the branch, the stake president was white. It was, you know, it was a white stake. And the mission president was over us. I don't really know how that works. If you're a missionary, you might understand. I don't. But when it's a branch, you don't really have a stake, but it's the mission president who's kind of, so anyway, all those people were white. So ever since I was younger, I knew white leadership, really, really righteous. And that's what I wanted. So that was the Arizona thing for me, was, okay, testimony, overdrive. Let's do it. Let's be faithful, strong all the time. It doesn't matter if I don't really fit in. It's okay because I'm spiritual. So
white on the inside.
Yeah. Yeah.
Spiritually white and delightsome.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Yeah. And high school was very white too. Seminary though, that was another place where I loved it. Part of the Arizona experience is I loved seminary because I was so spiritually driven. So it was like my thing. But in seminary was when that Ephraim and Manasseh experience happened. The teacher said, okay, raise your hand. We're talking about patriarchal blessings today. And I received mine when I was 14, just way too young. And, okay, raise your hand if you're from Ephraim, everyone. And then, okay, you didn't raise your hand. And I was like, well, I'm from Manasseh. And this boy turns around and he was like, outsider? Oh. And I remember being like, I internalized it way too much. I mean, he was just a teenage boy. But I was like, maybe I am an outsider, you know, maybe. And so then the teacher was like, you know, Laura, it's okay because the Manasseh is faithful. They're just not charged with the missionary work. So Ephraim was given the birthright. He was more faithful. And maybe he didn't word it that way, but that's how I ingested it. I do remember Ephraim got the birthright. Manasseh didn't. So those who come from Manasseh don't have that. And so that's kind of when I had moments like that where I was like, man, I'm really not good enough. And I can't control it. It's where I come from, you know?
Structural.
Yeah, structural.
Structural inferiority based on skin color.
Exactly. Exactly. Based on something I didn't choose.
Yeah.
So anyway. Yeah.
So seminary, I mean, you end up becoming a seminary teacher.
Yeah. Isn't that?
So did you eat it up? Did you love it?
I loved it.
What did you love about seminary?
Yeah. That I could be churchy, that I could read and talk about the gospel and Jesus. And I remember, this is so funny, my best friend growing up, I met her the first day freshman year, and I had come from New York. So the church wasn't a thing in New York outside of our branch, you know, like I would say, my best friend in New York was Sikh from India. So, you know, I love different religions, but if you say Mormon, everyone's like, huh? But in Arizona, I remember and thinking, oh, seminary and all these people. And I saw this girl that was in my seminary class, and I saw her in my PE class. And the first thing, and to this day, she still gives me so much crap about it. The first thing I asked her, and I was like, hi, I'm Laura. Do you read the Book of Mormon? She was like, and this is like a Mormon girl born and raised in Arizona who's like, this is so weird. Like, why are you? And she was like, I guess. I was like, really? Where are you? I'm a person. Just want to die, right? And this is PE, for Pete's sake. Like,
super Mormon.
So Mormon, right?
And she's thinking it's because she's like, yeah, me and 40 other people in this class.
Exactly. Yeah. She's like, all right. Yeah.
It's not our cool little secret.
Yeah, I read it to you. So, I mean, I loved seminary for that reason. Again, I only knew one other brown person in seminary. So, and he and I became friends. We kind of connected all the time. We were like, yeah, but they don't get it. So, but again, we both come from similar backgrounds, really strong convert, strong parents. So very spiritual. Never really felt we didn't belong in seminary, except for what we looked like. Other than that, we belonged there. We grew there. We wanted to be part of it, just like everyone else. So
tell us how your testimony developed from childhood to adolescence with both your mom's influence and with seminary. Like, what did it look like, your testimony?
It was just, if you could just, I don't know what pure means anymore, really. But for me, it was just this, I didn't need to understand everything to know that the church was true, that God was real, that Jesus Christ was my savior, because I leaned back on childhood experiences. I'm like, the missionaries bringing groceries. My mom surviving, getting out of New York, meeting my dad, getting married in the temple with my dad and seeing their life. You know, I just knew once my mom married him, though, he had come back to church. He kind of went a little off the deep end, then came back, and it was more obedience based. So I remember and finally the priesthood was in our home, you know, and that was a big thing for me. So my testimony kind of, it was always strong, but when he was in our lives, and he still is, that's when it took off. I was like, okay, the priesthood's in our home. We are complete. We now have all the blessings, except I'm still not a covenant kid, but that's okay. I'm spiritual, obedience. Now it's the obedience part. You know, it's I, the Lord, am bound when you do what I say. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to do every little thing. And so I became a little bit, I don't know if perfectionism, maybe it is the right word, but spiritually, I mean, I repented about anything and everything, all the time. So just to make sure, and it was, of course, the bottom line was to make sure I remained delightsome inside, you know? I could not bear the thought of me losing my light, because I was not, in my mind, I wasn't good enough already, but if I could be spiritual enough, so then I couldn't let my guard down spiritually. I had to stay in the light all the time. So very, very strict with myself.
What were your prayers like?
I always ask for forgiveness in all my prayers, just in case. I would ask for forgiveness for things I wasn't sure if I did wrong, just in case they were wrong. I always asked for guidance. I always always expressed gratitude. I remember it was later on, my senior year, I prayed that I wouldn't fall away. I kind of had an obsession with it. I just did not want to lose my testimony. I did not want to leave the church. I was like, please bless me to never leave the church. Please bless me to never fall away. Please bless me with light, with discernment, please. And my little sister, she's ever since she was younger, she would be kind of the curious one. And I would be like, no, you can't ask that. You know, don't say that. I remember in high school, she went to this camp. She was invited by her teacher who was, she was out as a lesbian. And it was like this, this queer camp where straight people and queer kids, they come together. And anyway, my sister was invited by this teacher, and she said, I think you're great. I think you'd be great in our community. Let's go together. And my parents were so mad. And I remember sitting at the dinner table and they were like, we're disappointed. Like this, if you go, just know, beware of this. And I remember kind of taken it on me to be that person for my sister. Like, hey, okay, just be careful about this, okay? So that was always my role, is I need to be really spiritual, but also I'm an example too of spirituality.
You're the female equivalent of Nephi.
Yes, I am Nephi.
You are Nephi.
Yes.
That's Nephi for those who.
Yes.
I was like, what? Google Translate? I'm lost.
Nephi is Spanish-speaking Nephi.
Yeah.
Those who don't know yet.
I followed it.
You got it, right?
I got it.
Yeah. So, yeah. So my testimony was really, really strong. I always knew too, and I always would say I knew that it was true. And
The Mormon church was true.
Yeah. And I never thought about anything on the outside being remotely, even my best friend in New York being Sikh. I always thought, that's okay. She has her thing, but she's wrong, and that's okay. God loves her, I'm right, and that's good. And I'm delightsome, and I'm the chosen, whatever thing. So
It feels good to be chosen.
yeah, it does. It does. Even if you're the second chosen,
Right.
even if you're Manasseh chosen, it still
Second
feels
class
good.
chosen, you're still chosen.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. So I would say I graduated high school extremely believing, like very, very, very faithful.
John always asks this question, but I'm going to ask it this
Yeah,
time.
love it. Go for it. You read my mind.
All right. Was there anything in your teenage years surrounding sexual shame that you want to, it's up to you, anything that you want to share about that time period of your life?
That's a really good question. I think thoughts. I did not want, I just realized I said, I think thoughts. Of course, but
What?
thoughts were the only thing that I remember just being like, oh, I can't think about that. And obviously you're a teenager, so you start to be attracted, but boys didn't pay attention to me because white boys didn't like brown girls at my school. That's not a thing. They always wanted white girls. That's what I told myself anyway, because boys didn't like me. They didn't talk to me until my senior year. And I just didn't, I didn't get to experience anything physical with anybody. I just had lots of thoughts. And I remember repenting. And I was like, I can't think about that. I remember my junior year, I went to homecoming. No, what's the other one? MORP, which is prom backwards, where the girl asked the guy, with this guy I thought was so cute. And he didn't even hold my hand. It was a hand cup. And I was like, I remember being like, this might be too much because of what I was feeling, not the hand holding. I was like, this is okay. But I was feeling way too much. And
You're just attracted to him.
Yep.
You're a normal teenage.
A normal hormonal thing. Yeah. And of a 17-year-old girl. But I felt like way, way too many things. And I was like, no, those things are too sexual. Like in my mind, I was like, it's supposed to be like, like that quote by, I'm pretty sure it was Kimball, that a kiss between a boy and a girl should be like unto a boy kissing his mom. So I felt, and I learned that in seminary because chastity lessons were hard. But I remember being like, I shouldn't feel these things with him cupping my palm. Like I should feel more of like an innocent love, not like this, whoa,
Yeah.
So I did feel terrible about it. Luckily, I did grow up with my mom being Latina, and that sexuality is a lot more normalized. It's just, it's just kind of the essence a little bit. It's more of like, hey, this is who we are versus like, this is what we feel sometimes. It's more like, hey, that's normal. So I did have a little bit of course correction because of that. But I still, from what seminary taught me, I was like, I shouldn't be feeling this strong of things.
Yeah.
Or be thinking, because then my mind would wander. I'm like, what if he, and then I would stop myself and be like, I'm so sorry, Heavenly Father, like, I'm sorry, and then knowing that I said sorry, then I would feel better. But that was it.
Were you ever given those lessons about like, tell me if this sounds familiar. I was taught this when growing up. If you are unsure if you need to even repent to the bishop, you should probably go repent to the bishop.
Yes.
Just to be safe.
Yes.
Were you ever given that kind of idea?
Yes.
Because now I just have a funny idea and you going to the bishop being like, we were cupping hands. It was out of control.
It was that. What do you think I should do? Yes, I was. In fact, I remember in seminary, we learned about godly sorrow. Good video there. The song. And I remember being like, oh, and later on someone asked.
Wait, what's the teaching of godly sorrow?
That, well, she had sex with her boyfriend, and then her returned missionary, Aaron Eckhart, what about the pain? He is like, we should get married in the temple. And she's like, well, and then she tells her bishop, and her bishop's like, nope, you can't. You got to, too bad that you sent out your invitations. Nope. And of course, he's like this crusty old man, and he's like, no, you have to feel godly sorrow. And then the song starts. And godly sorrow is what you should feel in order to fully repent. And so later on in the lesson in seminary, someone said, but what should we talk about what if we haven't done what this girl did with her puffy sleeves and Provo? What if we didn't do that? And I remember my seminary teacher saying, it doesn't, whatever, even if you think you did something, just talk to the bishop just to clear your conscience. And I was like, okay. So, and I wasn't planning on sharing this, but I feel like maybe if someone out there, I don't know, can feel less alone. I remember being really scared. And when you're growing up, you don't really know. You know and you don't, and you explore whatever. But I remember feeling like I could have a crush on this girl. And I was like, I feel really weird about this. And she was really cool. And I was like, but do I? And feeling that was the biggest one for me. I was like, no, this is a sin. I cannot be attracted to a girl. Nope. No. And honestly, now that, I'm a grown up and married to a man in a heterosexual marriage, I don't struggle with, could I be, I'm working through a lot of shame-based self-talk, but I do want to talk back to my 17-year-old self and tell her, if you do, it's okay. That's okay. If you don't, it's okay. If you do, it's okay. But I remember waking up crying and praying and writing my seminary teacher a letter like, what if you repent so much, but you still aren't sure if you're forgiven, but being too scared to tell my seminary teacher that I was maybe having thoughts of possibly liking another girl,
Yeah.
So anyway.
That's a confusing dynamic, because it's not just like I'm having, too far of thoughts maybe sexually about a boy in my head. If it's about a girl, that is something that now you are fundamentally wrong, and that you feel like you're, need to change something maybe fundamental to your sexuality and who you are.
Yeah.
That's a whole other ballgame, right?
A whole other, yeah. And that's what scared me, is I was like, oh no, I for sure know this is a sin. So absolutely not. And I never
double down after that.
Yeah. So I never let myself, which comes into play later on as a seminary teacher when I have students coming out to me.
Right.
Yeah. And so anyway, I remember that one being a really strong experience of, I have to repent now. I cannot procrastinate the day of my repentance, right? Like Amulek says. So anyway, that's the only, to your question, Kara, that's the biggest one for me, is needing to be clean of even the thought of possibly the thought. So anyway.
And we will leave a link to the Godly Sorrow Seminary video in the description below, because Kim needs like a day of rain. That video, I know exactly what you're talking about. She's like, but I'm not with that guy anymore. Bishop's like, get out of here.
Right. Send back your invitations. Right? Yeah. So
I have not seen this.
Oh,
you have to have seen this.
If you
were kicked out of the room, John DeLynn, if you haven't seen this.
Yeah. If you don't follow Latter-day Labia on Instagram, you absolutely must, because she puts together these videos, and she used
Latter-day Labia. There's another show note.
Oh yeah.
She's got the medallion, right?
Yeah, she does the medallion. Yeah.
Classy. I love that.
Right? So good.
I need one.
I know.
If you guys don't know what we're talking about, Latter-day Labia, shout out. It's the Young Women's Medallion. A little bit, use your imagination anyway.
Yeah, but she takes these videos that are no longer in circulation, and she just kind of stitches them together, and it's really interesting, because I'm like, hey, I remember watching that in seminary, and she's like, you did, and anyway, but you know the video. So I think John deserves to watch it.
All right.
Yeah. Elf on the Shelf has an entire response video to it that's really funny as well. Another shout out for that.
There you go.
Okay. So you even as quote righteous as you were able to avoid kind of the shame parade of the bishop youth kind of one-on-one interview thing, but you still were tormented nonetheless.
I was.
For the handcuffing and the
handcuffing
and the feeling of something for another young woman.
Yeah.
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 And just thoughts about men.
Yep.
Yeah. Even the quote good ones are tormented, I think is part of the lesson here. Right?
Yeah. Oh no, you are never safe.
Yeah.
You have to be righteous all the time.
Yeah.
You know. So
all right. Anything else about your high school years before we move on to college?
No.
Okay.
High school was high school.
So you could have done ASU. You could have done,
yeah.
You know, you could have done Mesa Community College. You could have done the University of Arizona in Tucson. Lots of options.
Yeah, lots of options. But no, because why would I? If I could be extra spiritual, why wouldn't I go to the Lord's University? And I actually wasn't even going to go to BYU. I was going to go to BYU, Idaho. And that's where I think another miracle is I did not go to BYU, Idaho. That would have just destroyed any last semblance of brown complex I had, I think, in the bad way, of course. But my Mexican friend, the only other brown kid in my seminary class, he's like, hey, you should apply to BYU. And I was like, no, I won't get in. But I applied and I got in, but I didn't have I wasn't a resident yet, a legal resident. So BYU was like, oh, we can't accept you until you have your legal stuff in order. So they accepted me, but they waited until I had all that. And so I went a semester after I was accepted. So I should have gone fall 2007. I went winter 2008 because I finally had my Social Security and I had my green card. I had my papeles. So I was good to go.
Nice.
Yeah. So I went to BYU and it was great. I loved BYU. There was a lot more diversity than Gilbert, which is a sad thing to say. Yeah. So when you think BYU is diverse, yeah. So, but we
got people from Provo and Orem,
yeah,
and
Ogden,
Layton and Ogden.
Yeah.
We got people from Point of the Mountain, St. George. Right. You actually were roommates with my friend Katie Chrysler.
Fro? Yeah. Seriously? Yeah.
Wait.
That's why I was like, you got people from 1 mile up the street at Timpview,
oh
my friends.
Goodness. Yeah. Seriously? Yeah. Fro was amazing. She was my very first. She was my RA, and she played this joke on me because I went on I never dated, remember?
Was this Healing Halls or?
No, this was YView.
Oh,
back
so
when
good.
YView was open to the peasants, not married people. So she was an RA, and Fro, I remember.
Did she have hair or something?
Her hair was kind of hair. I don't know why she went by Fro. Why did she go?
It's like a childhood nickname that never went away.
That never went away. Okay, so this guy asked me, and okay, at BYU the dating, all RMs Spanish speaking. And I started putting 2 and 2 together. I'm like, I just remind you of your mission. That's why you want to go out with me. And so this older, I was 18 and this guy was 28 maybe. And he was like, invited me. And I'm just, all I have under my belt is handcuffing, right? So I have no, no experience. He's asking me out. He's super attractive. And he's like, do you want to come into my room? And I was like, okay. So I sit on his bed and he just he sits next to me, and I remember putting my hands on my lap, and I was like, I think you should drop me off. And he was like, oh, we're not doing anything. I was like, yeah, can we go? And I went home and I told Fro, I said, Fro, I went in this guy's room. And Fro was like, okay, I have to call the honor code office. Sorry. And I was like, no, but we didn't do anything. And she was like, I'm just kidding. I would never. I was like, oh,
Go
so
Fro.
That's Fro.
Go Fro.
No.
Yeah.
Wait, I got to shout out to Fro. Wherever you are, shout out to Fro. message me. I want to give you a thumbs up.
Oh, that's awesome. She'll love that. So
Does she listen to Mormon stories? Just for
She better. She's an out lesbian now. So.
yeah, she for sure is, right?
Yeah.
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 Look at that.
Did you know she was lesbian at the time?
I had suspicions because we would go through the word list and circle.
This is the life of Fro.
The life of Fro. This is how we knew about you, Fro.
It's actually important. There is like a dynasty kind of thing because they're going to love that we're talking about them. Fro and Brittany Herdman Mangelson, who is a minister at Community of Christ. Do you know her?
Yeah.
Yeah. So Fro and Brittany are lifelong friends, and they're like friends of mine as well. Do you know Brittany?
Yeah, I do. Because
Okay.
Fro always talked about Brittany.
Great. Yeah. They're
The
like
embedded
twins.
lives of Fro and Brittany in
And
Laura
Kara.
Schnell's and Kara in Laura Schnell's interview. Okay, go.
Exactly.
So go
Okay,
on.
go.
Yeah. So there is like this ex-Mormon dynasty here.
That's
okay, go on.
so cool. And she probably has no clue about. Okay. Anyway, so
So Fro.
She will be watching.
Clues about Fro.
so
Suspicions.
we would go through the page, the they called it the menu. I hate that. They called it the ward menu, which is just
Which was?
pictures of everyone in the ward.
It's like the Facebook.
Yes.
The word Facebook.
Yes, and of course, every bishop at
menu.
BYU, right? They want to get you married, and so of course, put a picture up, right? And if it was a richer ward, it was color pictures. So we were looking through, and we would circle, and we always asked. Oh, I'm sorry, I just moved that, but we always asked, Fro, who do you think is cute? And she's like, nah. I'm like, what about him? No. And one time, it was just her and I in the apartment. And I'm like, do you think any guy's cute? And she's like, I think they're all dog-faced. And I was like, oh. And you probably think it's funnier, Kara, because you know Fro. But I remember being like, what is that? What? And she was like, they're all ugly. And I remember being like, maybe she's not attracted to guys. Maybe she's not. And she's not. So
Yeah.
Anyway,
That's
she was
like-
a great roommate.
I bet. There's a certain level of like just being a pessimist comedian of sometimes, I would have probably said the same thing, but I was absolutely wildly heterosexual. So it's like, so I would have said the same thing. It's just because I'm pessimistic about, all of the losers or something.
Yeah.
No one's dating me or something.
Right. And that's what I thought. I was like, oh, she's just, it's just Fro. She hates everything. But
So from then on, it was always side-eyeing Fro, basically. Ooh, she's a questionable.
she's questionable. And but Fro loved the Tabernacle Choir. And she was the first person that would take me to watch which was so cool and so spiritual, to go to their rehearsals.
Yeah.
Remember, you could go on Thursdays? Spirit, so strong.
Yeah.
She just said that you both liked to clown
Are you
on
texting
Pioneer.
Fro?
Yeah.
You're texting Fro? Okay. Hey, Fro.
She said that you like to clown on pioneers and petticoats.
Oh, yes. We loved Pioneers and Petticoats. Have you
What
seen
is
that
that?
one?
What
It's
is it?
another classic Mormon one where a girl almost, she gets the lusts
Is this a
of
video?
the world. Yes.
Okay, show notes.
The lust
Do
of the
jump there.
world. And
Show notes.
she makes it back. So anyway,
She makes it back what?
she wants to be immodest. It was back. Do you remember the Retrenchment Society, Brigham Young's first young women's organization, Retrenchment Society?
Okay.
She didn't want to wear the petticoats because they were too long. So everyone was like, you're immodest. And then she wanted to go and drink. And then she almost had a sexual assault experience. And then that was God's way of teaching her to be modest. And so she comes back and she's a good, modest girl. And it's called Pioneers and Petticoats.
Okay, I'll
that
write
not
that because
ringing a
Kara's
bell?
texting Fro, so I'll...
I'm ready.
I can't believe she remembered.
Please tell more stories about my friends. This is the greatest podcast.
Right? Pioneers and Petticoats, Johnny Lingo. We used to do that one. We used to troll that one too.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. You're describing this area, like time at BYU. This is probably around like 2008. Right?
Yep, 2008.
Yeah, just like good times. Like, I know we talk about a lot of things about the church. There's a fun dynamic. When you get fun girls in the church, that's why I had such a good experience in the church. Like, my friends are hilarious.
Yeah.
You can have good experiences at BYU if you have the right roommates who are into, the right niche.
You're right. the right Mormon niche videos. Yeah. No, it's so true. I had roommates like Fro and that were funny and light and would, make fun of things and not take things too seriously. And then I had roommates who were...
Wait, I just want to say everyone needs a Fro.
Everyone
And
needs
so,
Fro.
Fro, you're invited to come on Mormon Stories. I'm gonna make it...
You should actually, you know what?
I know.
That would be
Well, I just have to... I'm going to make a really embarrassing announcement. I have never interviewed a lesbian on Mormon Stories podcast, and we're almost 1,500 hours in. I'm revolted.
We're interviewing her through text. This is embarrassing.
But it's true.
Yes.
So I've talked to Latter-day lesbians about it, but, we need to, that's just a glaring, revolting, in my view, omission. So Fro, maybe you'll be the first. Maybe not. We'll see.
Yeah, she's actually a producer of a news station in LA. So she's like wonderful and legit. She's too big for us, honestly.
Okay,
She's too
sorry.
big.
All right, never mind. We'll aim our sights lower.
She can come.
Yeah, she's going to come in here and be like, Carrie, you need to clean this place up. What kind of producer are you? That's what she's going to do.
She is so, I can't believe that. We all need a Fro. You would love her. She's great. Katie, I didn't even know her real name really. I just knew her as Fro.
Yeah, same.
So, but Fro and I had one crazy roommate, and by that I just mean extremely, couldn't listen to Tchaikovsky because he was gay. Just wouldn't.
Ooh.
Yeah, and Fro would kind of she would always kind of give me the eye whenever that roommate was around, just kind of like, yeah. Like Fro knew, yeah, but she was the RA, so she kind of had to, but for the most part, BYU was like a Fro experience, just good, funny. Sometimes bishoprics were interesting here and there, but for the most part, really great. Dating was good. I was very righteous still, so always. So it was learning, and I learned. My dad always jokes. He's like, I sent you to BYU and you came back liberal. And I was like, yeah, I mean, education. I was just, and even then, I wasn't liberal. I was just open-minded. I took a world religions class. I actually didn't. I had a professor who was a world religions teacher who would always talk about things. And I remember being like, okay, maybe they're not wrong. Maybe it's just different. So that was the first time I let myself explore those things, was at BYU. So that's why BYU was really important for my growth, was exploring, okay.
How'd you get liberal at BYU?
Oh, because I took some classes from a professor who, I love him. I still keep in touch with him. He was kind of a loose cannon, taught at the Jerusalem Center, then was not allowed back in. And because he didn't want to just do the narrative of, Palestinians are bad, Israel. He was like, let's look at both sides. Like, Palestinians suffer just as much as Israel. So and it was a geography class that I took from him. And so he was very good at saying, hey, don't choose sides, learn both sides, and I never let myself. So I came home and I was like, did you know that also the Palestinians suffered also in Israel? And my dad was like, so, so he was just like, what? And yeah. So a lot of open-mindedness with that. So I loved it, but I wanted to go on a mission really bad. And I was dating someone, so that was really hard. And dating was always about marriage, obviously. But I'd never felt that marriage was my mom just didn't raise me. I mean, I come from divorced parents, so it wasn't like marriage was this silver platter. It was like, okay, well, it is what we do, but my mom was always like, please be smart, be careful, like open your eyes. She was never like, marry the first guy you meet. So I had that from my mom because she had experience. And so anyway, but I knew I was going to marry a white RM. I did know that. So.
You didn't want to marry a person of color?
Absolutely not. No.
Because?
No.
It wasn't on the menu.
It was not on the menu. He wasn't on the award menu.
There probably weren't a lot of them, first of all.
No, there weren't. And frankly, if there were, they probably didn't want to marry me either. Really, that's kind of the sentiment I got sometimes.
I'm like, I usually flip tables sometimes when I get angry about like church injustice, that any man wouldn't want to. Hello, come on.
You're very
or vice versa.
Right,
it's just I don't know.
So it's the fact, right, exactly. So many good, and I had friends that were my Latino friends, but I knew, I was like, I could never date you. I would never date you. Like, you would. What would be? I'd go from Garcia to what, Gonzalez? No, like, I'm not. That's just not. It's just not what we were. My sister and I always joked about that. She was like, I am not going from Garcia to another Spanish last name. So, which is terrible, terrible. I mean, this could be, our kids we're talking about here. Imagine my brown son thinking, no brown girl wants to marry me. It's terrible.
Are there similar, I'm trying to learn here. Are there similar sentiments then? Like what you just said, is that how a lot of maybe like Latino men would say, is that they're also trying to marry like white Mormon women when they are, you know, going to BYU? Like, is there just like this disconnection here?
I don't know, honestly. I don't. I from my friends, my brown friends, later, like when it became cooler to be cultural, later on, they wanted to marry a white girl because if she spoke Spanish, because it was that faithful thing, because white people are faithful. And so it was kind of like, well, yeah, because she'll come from a strong family. She won't come from convert parents. She'll come from a strong, 25th generation American fork. And that's what we want. And so it was kind of, and again, it's so unsaid. No one comes out and says, I want to marry, but it's just kind of well, are you attracted to her? No, I'm attracted to her. Her dad's a mission president. Oh, so you kind of like, don't say it without saying it. And so, but my brown guy friends would tell me, culture is important to me. I need to be able to marry someone who respects and understands the culture. But having Latina moms, I think they're like, but I don't want to marry a Latina. And some would. I did have brown guys who were like, I only want to marry Latinas. They're the only ones who are going to keep my language and my children in the language and the culture. And so it's hard to say. Yeah, mm-hmm. It's hard to say. For the girls, though, it is kind of that strong family of white RN priesthood holder. There is a stereotype about Latino men being a little lax. This is why branches have a hard time becoming stakes in Latino wards, or Latinx or Latine, whatever you choose to say. But anyway, it's really interesting.
I was just having the thought that this is going to be the wrong words, but like it's all gross. It's gross if Latina Mormon women only want to marry white men because they were taught that white men are righteous priesthood holders. It's gross if Latino Mormon men only want to marry white women because they want whiteness. But it's also gross if Latinx Mormons only want to marry each other because they have to stay in their race or class. And then it's gross if whites want to just marry each other because of white supremacy. Like I can't find a scenario that doesn't disturb me. And I think I've just covered all the scenarios, right?
I know. Yeah. And honestly,
racism makes everything weird, I guess.
It does. And we're all victims. I always tell my friends this. I'm like, we are all victims of white supremacy. All of us. Yeah. It's not, no one is untouched. We really all, and of colonialism, all of us. We all are. And so I remember when I was in India, and we'll get to this, but I was talking to my guy friends, my white guy friends, and I said, why don't white guys ever, they like the Latinas, but then they end up marrying just, their next door neighbor girl who's probably their fifth cousin. And they're like, well, and my friend told me, I still remember it, and I thought about it for so long. He's like, honestly, it's too much to make two cultures work, which is true. You are taught that. I was taught that in my Book of Mormon class, that I can't remember if it was Kimball or Harold B. Lee. Don't blend. Do not interracially marry. Just don't do it. And my Book of Mormon teacher did teach it in a nuanced way. He was like, I know some of you might think this is bad, but think about how marriage is hard already and how if it's interracial, it's even worse, blah, blah, blah. So my white guy friends would be like, I could marry a Latina, but she couldn't be a fob, which means fresh off the boat. Like if she would have to be like you, Laura, how you like are white passing. So to just make it less whatever. So it is all gross. Instead of valuing as humans, like I like you and you happen to be white, let's get married. Not just I need to marry this for that. And it really, I do want to specify. Some people might hear this and think, well, I'm not like that, but yeah. And it's what we ingest is how we unsay things that it's all unconscious or subconscious. So anyway, but
when you know better, you do better, I guess.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
Yeah, hopefully. Yeah. When you have kids, major wake up call. So anyway, but I was engaged, broke it off.
Why'd you break it off?
He wasn't sure if he loved me.
That's a problem. Why'd you get engaged?
Again, I'm like, who are these men sleeping on Laura over here?
Why'd you get engaged?
How or
To
why?
someone, why if he wasn't sure?
Because it was the pressure, and I was a senior. I had graduated already, and he
So you
was
were running out of
about
time.
running out of time at BYU. 23.
Yeah.
And he was going to graduate, and he was like, "Okay, here's the next step, and I like you." And he was very, very misogyny ran deep in him, though. So it was good that we broke it off. It was very good. And then I didn't go on a mission. I felt like I needed to. I prayed about it. It wasn't in my patriarchal blessing, which was devastating because it was in my sister's. And I was like, oh no. And my sister's patriarchal blessing is really cool. So I was like, what? She was going to serve a mission. She was from the righteous Lamanites. It said it. It didn't say it with me. It did say it with her. She was a righteous Lamanite, going to serve a mission. Mine was very just bland, just like, you will be good and you will marry in the temple. And so I wanted more. And that was frustrating for me because I was so, tell me what to do and I'll do it. And so my patriarchal blessing always frustrated me because of that, because it didn't tell me what to do. And I needed to know so that I could, and I must obey, Nephi's words. And I prayed and prayed and prayed and prayed. No answer about the mission, but I was sitting in an international development class. Dave Schuler, may he rest in peace. He was an amazing professor. And he said, if he said something along the lines of just kind of doing what your soul wants, or, something not even profound really. And it hit me. And I was like, okay, I'm not going to go on a mission. I'm going to go to India. And so I went to India instead.
What?
So it was awesome. So it was an international development program, which BYU no longer does because it was too hippie. So they got rid of it. It was not a study abroad. I am very passionate about, because study abroads are great, but that's just not the purpose of the program. It was to go observe and write reports, and that's it. It was to take cultural notes, very anthropologically minded. Mm-hmm. So
almost clinical.
Yeah, just kind of like, hey,
academic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, don't. You're not trying to teach anyone English. Nothing. You're there observing.
I guess that's good. Is that good?
It was great.
Oh,
it was really good. Yeah, because then we weren't there trying to, with this mindset of, we are educated Americans.
Cultural colonialism.
Yeah, yeah, we weren't. We just went there, and it turned me inside out. I mean, India was life changing.
What'd you learn in India? Like, I know that you can't summarize it.
Yeah. First of all, I did not feel anxiety, which is, I was at BYU. I was diagnosed with anxiety disorder. At 21, my 21st birthday, I had a terrible panic attack and didn't know where anything was coming from, and so much pressure on myself, But I just felt like India was the only place where I didn't feel it. And it was because I was so immersed in not doing everything that I was taught to do. We didn't really go to church, was only 2 hours, So, and no calling. I wasn't strictly doing everything. India was relaxing, even though it was really hard. And I lived in a village with, sleeping on the floor, but it was emotionally and spiritually a lot easier than being home and expectations and everything. I don't know if that makes sense. Physically, really hard. Culturally, really hard. Spiritually, I felt free there. And being around Hindus and feeling like, wait a minute, these Hindus are for sure going to heaven, and I know they're not going to get baptized. So that was interesting for me. That was kind of okay. These people are so Christ-like. They don't even know who Jesus is. These people who would feed me because they would feed me, and they wouldn't expect anything other in return. That was kind of like, that doesn't make sense.
There's that famous Mark Twain quote we keep quoting, which is, travel is fatal to prejudice.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So that's...
If you're not on a Christian colonialist mission, I should say.
Yes. Yes.
Maybe that's the exception.
With the exception of, yeah.
And then it reinforces prejudice.
Yes, exactly. I agree, though. But that's why it was so good, because we weren't there for anything. No mission, no teaching anything, no building anything.
Learn.
Just go and learn. Yeah. And then we were the last group. BYU discontinued us.
No.
Did they have a bunch of different ones like in different countries?
They did.
Too?
They did. Yeah. They had on Fiji, India, Tonga, Mexico, Europe. Yeah. It was called BYU Field Studies. So field notes, so you take field notes, and you have to, the way that BYU legitimized it is you have to go with the project idea. And so they're like, just give us a project idea. What are you going to do there? And so mine was women's self-perception. Well, how do women perceive themselves?
Nice.
And basically all I did was just hang around village women and learn from their incredible essence. They're just the most magnificent people, and all Hindu. So that was confusing, because I was like, you're so good, but you don't have the light, but you do have the light. And I'm really confused. So there's
a billion of you.
And there's literally, India is the second largest country in the world. But I will say though, the village we stayed in, because it was BYU, they did have a little tiny branch. So there were and by little tiny, I mean like 9 members, maybe on a good day. And they were Mormon, and yet so Hindu. Everything. I mean, the young women's president had a nose ring, because Indian women, especially traditionally, have the nose piercing. I mean, things like that, where they didn't quite get that. But I was in India when Elder Oaks organized the first stake ever in India. So we got to go, and I got to hear him say some interesting thing. At the time, again, I'm really strong and very devout, but that was the first time where I knew that maybe an apostle could maybe say the right thing.
What did he say?
Well, a stake in India is a big deal. It was in Hyderabad, 2012. And he says, I just want you to know that this stake was organized because other people are faithful, and you need to we need to raise the bar. You need to be faithful. We need more tithing payers. And we have a stake patriarch, and he will only be the patriarch of this stake. So if you've come from out of the stake, you may not get a patriarchal blessing. Even if you want one, you will have to wait. It's very like you can't do this, you can't do that. Instead of celebratory, and there was plenty of celebratory things, but I just remember that talk being like, And then he said, and I don't anticipate a temple being built in India in your lifetime. There needs to be way more tithing and more righteousness for that to happen. And LOL that there's a Bangalore temple being built or announced, I guess.
Really?
Yeah, I think 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago, it was announced. So in Bangalore, South India. So.
But the big problems with his talk were, just to summarize.
And he said, remember, your culture is important, but what's more important now is your culture and identity as a Latter-day Saint. And that I have just spent time with these people, and I'm like, no, don't tell them their culture isn't. Obviously I understand that your identity is way more than just your culture, but it was the way he was saying. He's like, that's secondary. You're a Mormon first. That's the most important thing. You're an Indian second, you're a Mormon first. Ugh. And I was sat there and I was like, I don't know about that. I don't really like that. And it felt condescending, and it felt like he was asking a lot when these people, I was on the bus from hell for 18 hours without a pee break, Kara. If you can imagine, only the boys could stop and pee. We couldn't. So that was long, and I wasn't even an Indian person. Imagine the people who are coming from Delhi or from other places, and here's this apostle saying, you guys can't get patriarchal blessings. That's just for the stake, and just things that are kind of like dampers. And so I just kind of felt disappointed a little, but I thought, well, maybe it's good for them to hear it. Maybe it'll help them pay tithing, even though they're poor. When you, as a Hindu, when you become a Christian, you have to denounce Hinduism, meaning that you denounce caste, meaning because there's programs for caste systems. So some of the villagers were lower caste, and so you get a government aid. When you become a Christian, you denounce that. So you no longer get government aid. So these people who are, struggling, now they become Mormon and they're so faithful and they denounce that, but now they can't get help and they have to pay tithing. So that to me at that time was kind of frustrating and difficult, but I didn't let myself question that. I just was sad a little.
Interesting. Can I ask a follow-up question about that?
Yeah.
Because so many people do join the church and they pay tithing and they assume that they will get, quadruple the blessings back. Mm-hmm. Was that like the attitude of a lot of these like Indian Latter-day Saints, that either they saw the blessings or maybe like your family in Queens, like that even though they were poor, they saw the miracles from the church? Like, what are your reflections now that you look back at like what they gave up and what they got out of their attendance in the church?
Yeah, that's such a good question. What I saw for the most part was that they really were so willing to give everything because they knew, I don't know how they knew, but they just knew that if they could get themselves to the temple, that it would be okay. And
meaning like a ceiling or just have a temple recommend?
Yeah, even a temple recommend. And so that was the pinnacle for them, was if I get to go to the temple and experience the highest blessings and I get to have all of that I'm being taught, then it's easy. It's not a sacrifice even anymore. It's easy for me to give this up. It's easy for me to be poor but have faith. And so it's hard. I saw it as, but you're still suffering. You still don't have food on the table. You still don't have a house. You still don't have a job. But it's hard for me to say, what did they get out of it?
Yeah, I hate to speak into people's stories. Like I really don't want to, judge people's spirituality where they find peace. Yeah. And there's obviously ways that people can have spiritual experiences in every different walk of life and whatever kind of deity that they worship. So I think I think the thing that we're talking about here is like how much of their culture was replaced by like a very, I don't know, just like a really cool church that we love here at, I'm just going to say nice things. Just kind of things just really superseding their own culture. And I'm like, I don't want to speak too much into what they could have or couldn't have gotten out of it. That's up to every individual to decide. I was just curious your perspective on, like in terms of as well, welfare maybe of like the caste system, that if they had to give that up.
Yeah, they had to give that up. Yeah. And that one is a big one in my opinion. Once you become a Christian, you denounce that. So I was like, okay, so you denounce your free rice portion for the month. Okay.
Like, do they have a Bishop's Storehouse kind of situation there or no?
I'm not sure. I know that there are more affluent families. Typically though, and this is probably right for a lot of situations, the more affluent people don't join the church. Some do for sure, but they denounced that. So that was one thing. Another thing that kind of hurt to watch, kind of like shed, like don't get rid of that, is some Hindu things that are important, like puja, like the daily prayer. And that's very Hindu. And it almost becomes, I saw my Mormon Indian friends say it when I would ask about Hinduism, it became a thing of almost shame, like, oh, but that's Hinduism. We don't do that anymore, sister. We don't do that. And I'm like, you don't have to convince me. I believe that you don't do that, but why don't you? Because now we believe in Jesus. So this kind of like looking back at what you used to do and kind of feeling embarrassed, and rather than like, oh yeah, that was, that's what we used to do as a family when we were Hindu, but now we're not. It's almost like, no, don't associate me with that. I'm Mormon now. So that made me sad of kind of, and Hinduism is so rich and traditional, and it's way more than a religion. It's a lifestyle.
Right.
And so that kind of hurt to see, especially now, it hurts me now to see, man, so much of it shed. And in their dress too, like.
Right, I was going to ask that. How do they dress?
The women, luckily, I love, especially traditional village women, they'll still wear their churidars if they're single and their saris if they are married. And the men wear shirts and ties, which is funny to me, but the men will wear, just jeans and a t-shirt. So it's fairly not a huge change. But for example, Hindu women, they put red powder in their part in their hair to signify that they're married. And they stopped doing that once all the Mormon Hindu or all the Mormon Indian women that I talked to, they were like, we don't do that. We don't do that. So I was like, why? This is just cultural, or, so that to me, to shed who you are for a religion's sake, to me, I don't know. I have strong feelings about it. I think it wears on you a little bit.
Yeah. And I think you're somebody who can probably speak to that really well, since we were going and talking more about like the Lamanite doctrine and things that a lot of people have to adopt to feel like they are being complacent in the new theology, the new ideology that, maybe the children of these like former, these converts to the Mormon church that were Hindu, just the same way that maybe you or other people, you start to have a complex about where you come from that is just really unfair.
Yeah, that's exactly it, is you start to have a complex of literally your heritage. And that should never be a thing where you feel embarrassed or ashamed about a tradition, That's not harmful. It's just a tradition, a cultural tradition. Yeah. And so that to me, so when he said that, Kara, I'm so glad you asked that, because it kind of brings it full circle. So when he said that, I kind of watched it. I'm like, oh, that's why you do that. Because you have an apostle who speaks for God saying to do that. So that's why you're doing it. You should be embarrassed of it, because it's the right thing to do if you're trying to be more righteous, because you're Mormon now, right? You're not Hindu anymore. You're not Indian. You're Mormon. Yeah.
There's no way to tease out sometimes that Mormonism is a high demand religion where you have a lot of strict adherence to the brethren and to the doctrine and to your temple covenants. And I am assuming that, first generation Mormons, wherever they are in the world, maybe they don't know what to tease out of what they should keep from their old way of life to their new way of life, because it's so a 2 feet all in type of religion.
And something that when you said that, I remember sitting in the village and this woman, she was like, help me prepare my lesson. And it was about the pioneers. And I was like, why do you care about this? We're in
like the Utah pioneers.
Yes, the Utah. And she was like, what is the trek? And I said, okay, a trek is when you, and she's like, okay, what is carriage? What is a hand cart? And I said, why are we spending this valuable, you could be learning, like this would be a cool lesson about like Rama and Sita and the Ramayana and some cool Hindu tradition. Like instead you're learning about some people in the 1800s, thousands and thousands of miles away crossing the snow. And so that to me, I'm like, man, precious time, and wanting to understand it too. She's like, but I want to understand. I want to know what the pioneers did. They sacrificed so much. And I'm like, you sacrifice so much. Yes, right. They sacrifice so much. No disrespect there, absolutely. But this is so irrelevant to you. And so it almost feels like, hey, become Mormon here in India, embrace all of these things spiritually and also culturally. Embrace cultural Mormonism. Learn about pioneers and trek and handcarts. And it's like, why? For what? So that was interesting for me to see.
Yeah. And that's what's really difficult is I never, I don't want people to get the wrong idea about what this conversation is about or what Mormon Stories does or, the opinions at hand here of like, I want people to find meaning and find value in beliefs that push them to be a better person. Mm-hmm. And if people connect with the Mormon teachings and that's what gives them peace and value, in whatever stage in life that they're in, like, I'm not going to discount that. But there are ideas forwarded from just different colonial mindsets that we are all victims of that have kind of left over. And if we don't do the job to, President Oaks could so much more easily find the words to invite these two cultures to maybe the Mormon, he's more inviting them to teach him or teach us, or instead of going into another country and we're going to supersede, what you're taught and your ideas around religion. So I'm glad we're having this conversation because I hope that people are picking up kind of what we're talking about and not what we're talking about.
Right,
it's not to discount that these people find meaning in Mormonism. I think that those things can go hand in hand. It's about doing it responsibly and understanding like the externalities of superseding people's cultures and maybe the effects that it has on their kids and grandkids about maybe giving them a complex. So
yeah,
that's interesting.
I mean,
that's so true.
I think the legacy of Christian missionary work is cultural colonialism and even cultural genocide, where the white culture just erases the native culture. And it's a bummer and it's a problem. And I think the church, from my context within the church, they're realizing it's a problem, because it's fine when America is associated with hot dogs and apple pie and the Yankees and Michael Jordan, you know, and everything that's good globally, then that's great. But there's a downside to that. If America starts to be associated with war and genocide and values that are racist or whatever, then that can tear the church down. So the church has been in this battle over the past 10, 20 years of like, well, what actually is the gospel and what's like white Utah culture?
Yeah.
Can you pass the sacrament in a multicolored tunic in Africa, or do you have to wear a white shirt and tie? Like what? And I think the church is split, because I think the church often thinks like IBM or McDonald's, which is like the whole idea of McDonald's is you want a Big Mac to taste the same in India that it does in the United States. Right. And I think the brethren want the ward to feel Mormon, you know, whether it's in India or the United States.
Right.
But I think that's also coming back to bite the church now that people like America a lot less globally. And so I think it's always going to be a tension. I was just going to ask, if there's anyone who's ever actually been a Mormon in India, and I think I know somebody, I want to have you on Mormon Stories. I think I know somebody. So this reminds me, Carol, will you write this down? I know someone from India that we can have on Mormon
We're always
Stories.
trying to get more like multicultural guests as well. That have different experiences.
Country,
just like you're talking about, we want to know how the franchise model is going over well, in South Africa or wherever else.
But I actually know someone who converted to Mormonism in India. So Kara's going to remind me to reach out to that person and schedule them for Mormon Stories. They live in Cache Valley, actually. Really? But what I was going to say is that I was torn listening to you talk about the caste system and renouncing it, because it wasn't until I was an adult that I learned, and I read a biography of Gandhi, that the caste system in India, number one, is highly stratified. It's super unkind and unfair to the poor.
Absolutely.
And it's based on skin color.
Absolutely.
Like the caste system is like the darker you are, the lower your caste is. Yep. And that has all sorts of significance when it comes to jobs and opportunity and intermarrying
and you're
and
born
culture.
into it. You can't jump castes.
Yeah. So like when you're telling me the more affiliation with the Christian or Mormon church is then encouraging them to renounce the caste system, there's part of me that's like, yay, that caste system is worse than the Book of Mormon, right? Mm-hmm. But I know you're talking about the socioeconomic implications of renouncing it. Sure. And you want these people to be able to eat, and that's what you're saying.
Right.
I just want to ask one quick question, then we probably should jump to the next part of your story. Why isn't we know that the church spread like wildfire in Mexico and in Latin America, South America. We know that it spread like wildfire in the Philippines. We know that it spread like wildfire in Africa. But in China and India, which is, I don't know if people know this, half of the world's population lives in two countries, China and India. Yep. And the church is like nothing in China and India. Why is the church not spreading like wildfire in India? Do you have any idea? Is it the government? Is it just the culture? Is it racism on our part? Like, what is it?
Honestly, I wish I knew. I have guesses, but my only thought is that Christianity as a whole is not. Christianity is big in these countries you mentioned, right? Catholicism. The Philippines was Spain took over the Philippines, so we have Catholicism there.
So it's only one step.
So then you pick up,
it's an easier step from Christianity to Mormonism.
Absolutely.
Okay.
But suddenly you have India that has, first of all, Hinduism is the official religion, but then you have Islam, you have Jainism, you have Buddhism. Those are the attractions, you know.
And the bridge too far for many people.
It is, I think so. And also something that people don't know about India, I think that I didn't when I went there, is every state has a language. Yes, the language is Hinduism, the official language, or Hindi, that's the religion, Hindi, and then English, the two official languages, English and Hindi, because it used to be, you know, British. But every state has a language. Right. That's near impossible, right? And in fact, in the village, we used to sing the hymns in English. These villagers have no clue what they're saying. Zero clue, right? Jesus and they have no idea. But they're singing so faithfully in English because why would you have time to translate into Tamil, into Telugu, into, you know?
Well, the fact the church doesn't have money.
Yeah.
More sarcasm.
No. That was direct.
Really?
The church has money.
The church has money.
It could do it.
It could do it. But is it worth it to do it for a 9-branch, like a 9-person branch?
There's not a critical mass.
Yeah.
They need more critical mass.
Exactly. And so it's hard to, if you could just do Spanish, and not to say there aren't dialects in these countries. Absolutely, there are. But India is very, very diverse, extremely diverse. You don't speak you don't speak a language from state to state. And so I think it's hard there, and also because of the religion, they're not predominantly Christian. The South is a little more Christian than the North, but when you said the caste system, one of my dearest friends there, he told me, I said, why did you convert to Mormonism from Hinduism? And he said, because I'm low caste, and because they taught me that Jesus touched the lepers, and it made me think that Jesus might touch my hand and not be grossed out because I'm low caste. And I was like, that's moving. I can understand that. Maybe there's that sense of I matter. And so it made sense to me why he would convert.
Which then, again, begs the question, why doesn't Christianity spread like wildfire if that message, at least with the lower caste, but it doesn't. So
No. Yeah,
okay.
Interesting. Maybe if you have your Indian guest, maybe he or she.
Yeah, it's a woman.
He or she.
Yeah.
Oh, it's she. Okay.
I can't say I'm sad, but I'm curious.
Yeah.
You know.
Can I ask one more question?
Please.
Is there the same sentiment that you described about skin color and interracial marriage, and the way you just described maybe converting to Mormonism in the caste system makes people feel like they are moving up, that the same way that you were describing earlier about having like interracial children, and that people are trying to like, you know,
forward the race.
Pay forward. It's all just very like white supremacy, right? Of just like this, like breeding out the darker skin for the lighter skin continually as much. Is there an attitude in India against their own skin color and wanting to convert maybe that they think it would like lighten their skin? Maybe, I know you can't like speak for an entire like, you know, group of Latter-day Saints there, but right, like, but do they have that same type of doctrine or in their minds about their skin lightening, and then maybe marrying a white like man or woman will improve them? Because I have a friend who did the same program and married an Indian man, and I think that's kind of the dynamic she described. And I was just curious. She's Mormon as well. So.
Oh, awesome! She did field studies too.
Yes, I don't know which one it was exactly.
Okay,
but a man proposed to her as she was like leaving that she didn't know, because I think he was kind of desperate to. I don't want to talk to their story too much, but wanting to marry a white woman seemed like it was a high priority to him.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So within, and all my point of reference is a village, very traditional village. So with what I saw, castes, especially, well, yes, with the white supremacy thing, yes, being a colony of Britain, they would see me, and if I went outside and got tan, they'd be like, no, sister, no. And like would, put powder, and I'm like, oh, well, I'm good being tan, but they did not. It was no, like you don't want to be dark. That was the overall message.
And that was a Mormon thing, or just the
colonial internalized gross leftovers. Yeah. And so I imagine I didn't get, and there was a language barrier, I didn't get, I was curious, how does this doctrine make you feel? The white, because they're not Lamanites.
Right.
So it's like, where's, do you feel like you'll be white and delightsome? I never really got that. With marrying, the villagers are very traditional. In their mind, they will never, ever leave the village. But I imagine city people, we did see some city members, they would say, you know, they would joke around at least, you know, if we married a white girl, we could get out of here. You know, it's like, it's an opportunity also. And also, I think it would be seen as prestigious. But again, I can't speak to that and I don't know.
Yeah.
But that's just kind of the vibe that the 5 of us who were there, we later talked about it. And we're like, did you get that vibe? And we're like, totally. Villagers, not so much. They're like, nope, here only.
Interesting.
But Mormon villagers, I am curious about how they internalized the white and delightsome thing, because they are a couple shades darker than me. They're pretty dark in South India and Tamil Nadu, but especially lower caste. So,
yeah, when you mix religion with colonialism, post-colonial countries, I'm sure there's just like a hotbed of just kind of a mess and a caste system all mixed into with one.
Yeah.
From like kind of a scripture that has white and delightsome doctrines. I'm just wondering, yeah, that's a good answer. And we don't want to, just curious for the vibe of, what you kind of experienced there.
Yeah, good question though.
All right. So anything else you want to say about your experience in India? And then we'll jump to the next phase.
No, I love it. If you ever get a chance to go, you absolutely must. And if any of my 5 friends are listening, or I guess 4 friends, they made it so much better. Those 4 people that I went with. And anyway, great country.
Okay. So where does your Mormon story go from there?
Well, then I come back, and that's actually when I get engaged, is I come back and it's kind of like, okay, well, I'm back from India. What do I do now? I guess I could maybe work. I should work. What do I work in? My degree is worth literally nothing, but I loved it. I loved my degree. I loved what I did, but unless I have a master's, I can't do anything with it. So I thought, well, I like teaching, even though I don't know if I do, but I like the idea of it. So I come back and I come back to Utah. And I get engaged, I get unengaged, then I meet another guy, start dating him, and at the same time that I start dating him, I start looking for work, and I work at this language school. But it was way too part-time, and then I was at the BYU career fair, and I see this guy just with a little... His booth was very bare. He just had a picture of Jesus and something that said seminary teaching ? And I approached him and I said, oh, it's this. And he explained it. And he's like, you got to take a class, you do this, that. So I took the class, and when I took the class first, when I first started taking the class, I was still engaged. And my then fiance said, why do you want to teach? Why do you want to be a seminary teacher? Don't just women want to be like secretaries or something if they want to work? And so I thought, yeah, maybe he's right. So I stopped. So I kind of forgot about it. Then after we broke up and all that, I actually emailed the guy I had met again, the guy I met at the work fair. And I said, do you have a class? And he said, yeah, join our class. In that class, I take it and I'm just like, oh, this is, again, seminary feelings. And there are 2 people that teach it, and they're called the rotation. I mean, they're called the pre-service people, okay? And he said, the first thing he said was, if you're here is because you're meant to be here, and trust that. And I was like, oh, I am. So anyway, we're taking the class, and it's really intimidating, very...
Is this at BYU?
This is at BYU.
Okay.
Because it's free.
But you graduated.
I had graduated, so it's free to take. Yeah, so I was like, yeah, I'll take it. And actually, all UVU has one, U of U has one. Yeah, the seminary 471 or something like that. So I'm taking it, and it's
like Mormon ROTC basically.
Yeah, yeah. And if you're
every university's got one.
Yes, exactly. And if you're an RM, that is your jam. I think most RMs come back and they're like, I'm meant to be a seminary teacher, and you just feel it in your bones.
I wanted that.
Yeah. So I was like, well, I like teaching. I love the gospel. Let's see. Really intimidating, very heavy on the word of God, understanding this. And then you have these practicums, and I was getting really nervous, and the anxiety that was gone in India was all back. And I thought, okay, well, I guess I'll just go for it. And we had the first practicum, and you teach for a couple of days, and then you actually teach one time. This is again 20 13, so I'm sure it's different. But you teach one class to everyone in your class. So you teach your classmates and this teacher, and then they decide, okay, I think you got what it takes maybe to do a high school one. So you do a high school one for a day or two, and then again, it's that same thing. Yeah, you got what it takes. And then you come back. Well, in that 471 class, I was feeling so much anxiety. I was like, I don't know what it takes to teach. I'm not sure. I want to be able to face students, but I don't know. And this guy walks in late, and he walks in with like a baseball cap, and he's very tall, and he sits in the back, and the teacher calls on him a couple times. He's like, "Hey, welcome, Brother Oslund. Welcome to class." And I was like, "Oh, he's kind of sitting in the back. He's kind of by me." So class ends, and I approach him, and I'm like, "Hi, I'm so sorry. I want to ask you a question. You've been teaching," and he had been doing his student teaching, I think. And I said, "Okay, do you have advice for me? What can I do? I have my practicum," because I had passed the initial. They're like, "Yeah, you could teach high school for, the couple days, for a week maybe." So I was really nervous, and he said, "Look, the most important thing you can do is just love them. Just love the kids." And I just thought, wow. So that actually changed my trajectory entirely, because here I was getting like, the word of God, know this, say this, teach that. And then this guy that I just met said, "Hey, just love them. That's all that matters." And so I thought, okay, I can do that. I think I can definitely do that. Nice to meet you, by the way. I'm Laura. Hi, I'm Mark. And then I teach, and I do well, and they like me, and they say, "Okay, I think we want you to do student teaching. This will be the student teaching part." Again, only brown. I was looking around. I was the only brown woman. But I'm used to that at this point, so I'm not bothered by it. I'm just like, okay, so I have to measure up. I have to really measure up, because I don't want to be left behind, especially because I'm not an RM. So I'm less spiritually, So I'm teaching, and I do my student teaching, and we have all of these just observations, and it's hard to be observed while you're teaching. It's hard to not make eye contact with the random white old man in the back when you have teenagers in front of you, and you're trying to, teach the gospel and be funny, but also connect and love. It's just a lot. But I got hired. So they were like, yeah. And I remember asking one of the leaders, I said, "Why would you hire a woman if you know that she could get married and have kids?" At the time, there was a policy in seminary, this was 2013, that once a woman became pregnant, she was terminated. So maybe they would do some sort of severance package or something. I'm not sure, but I knew that was the policy. Pregnancy equals no more teaching, no more working. So I thought, well, I'm 24. I could get married and pregnant. Why would I get hired? So I asked him, and I said, "Why would you hire someone like me?" And he said, "Well, because even if you teach for a year, it's worth it for the kids to have a good teacher." So I was like, okay. So I felt fine about that. So I got hired. And then it was actually, I got hired with Mark.
Yeah.
At the same time.
Yeah.
And I kept seeing, I was like, oh. And so what happened is that he was on his second. Usually people do a full year of student teaching. I only did half a year because there was a spot. If there's a spot and you're good, you're in. If you're good and there's no spot, you got to do another time.
Okay.
So that they just kind of look at that. And so we got hired together. So we started going to meetings together and like, "Hey, remember me? Yay."
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So it was fun because that friendship, continued.
Becomes important.
It becomes very important. Yeah. And he was someone, I knew he was a convert, and he was literally, I don't think in his Mormon stories, I don't think he gives himself enough credit to how, if Marc Oslund walks into a room full of teenagers, it's magnet. I mean, he starts talking and they're just like glued and hanging on his every word, And so he was a great person to kind of, to grow up with in seminary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Shout out
I'm
to
honestly
Mark.
jealous.
Yeah.
I wish that I went through the abuse of the CES program to get hired just so I could hang out with Marc Oslund.
Right. I know.
He's the best.
And his wife.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
He always says, okay, there was he mentioned this meeting once where somebody asked his wife to give the prayer. I was sitting next to her in that. I remembered listening and I was like, I was there. But he said that they asked his wife to pray.
I'm forgetting.
Rachel.
Yeah, Rachel.
I was sitting next to Rachel and she was just she was like, I don't want to say the prayer, and I just remember being like, this is so weird how they make us just feel all so spirit, like forced. You just force the spirituality. It's literally Saturday at 10 a.m. and it's like, shall we pray? And it feels, but we're all into it, at least we are. The spouses aren't. Rachel was not, but Mark and I are like, yes. So it was good. It was just the hiring process is brutal because going to the general authority interview feels so weird and you're sitting in front of a general authority. I had the pleasure of having Boyd K. Packer's son, Alan Packer, who I tried to joke with him. It was not a good idea. I was like, you look like your dad. He was like, sit down, please. I was like, oh. So we're just sitting and he's like, go ahead.
Did you know that I share this trauma bond with you? Have you listened to my Mormon stories? That you don't joke around with the son of a general authority, because I joked around with the son of Elder Oaks, was my bishop.
Seriously?
And my jokes don't land. Your jokes don't land.
Jokes don't land. Seriously?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's offensive. Like,
yeah. Like you're trying to lighten the mood. They do not lighten the mood very well.
Don't. Darken it. Mm-hmm. Darken the mood. Yeah.
Yeah, that was my first shelf item. Go on.
That's amazing. And he said, go ahead and bear your testimony of the gospel of Jesus Christ, And so I was like, well, I know it's true and I believe, it's a testimony. And he said, what makes you hireable? Like, why would you want to be hired? And I said, I'm pretty sure I played the race card. I said, well, I am Colombian and I come from convert parents and I have a very strong testimony. And I think it's important for kids to see that people from different countries also believe in Jesus Christ and have something. And he was just like, okay. And then it was the end. Oh, and he asked me if I served a mission and I hadn't. And I don't know if there was worry. Who knows? But I left and I got hired now.
Nice.
Yeah. So I was endowed though. I didn't mention that in my growing up story, but I was sealed to my mom and dad. And so I was 18 when I wanted to be. And really my mom and dad, I think, wanted me to be more. They were just like, I think it's time. We need to get sealed. Our family needs to be eternal. Anyway, and my father was heartbroken, but he didn't give me permission. And so the church has this policy that if an adult child wants to be sealed to adult parents, they need to be 21 and they don't have permission from the birth parent, from the biological parent.
21
they
or
need
18?
To be 21.
And was your dad still a Mormon at this point?
Yeah.
Oh no.
Yeah.
So you're getting sealed to a different dad.
Okay, so explain that for non-Mormon listeners, like how that works. Because people are going to get confused, I know.
Okay, so like the sealing, right? If your mom and dad are sealed in the temple, then you're born in the covenant. Well, my mom and dad were not. And so I was technically not sealed to them, meaning in the next life, I wasn't going to be with them.
It wasn't an eternal family.
Who knows? It wasn't an eternal family. Yeah, it doesn't make sense and it does at the same time. Yeah. So we weren't sealed in the temple. We can only hope to be sealed
to your biological parents.
To my biological parents. But if they happen to be divorced, I can't get sealed to them. I have to wait until I'm dead for someone to seal me to both of them. So I'm 18 and my mom, who's now married to another man.
Mormon man,
right? So my Mormon father and my Mormon mom and Mormon stepdad, the three parents. But I have my mom and my stepdad, Mormon, say, get sealed to us. We need to be an eternal family. And I'm thinking, yes, but what about my father? And they're like, it's okay. My Mormon father, who knows about the sealing, who's been a missionary for the church, who got baptized in the 70s, who doesn't get to have an eternal family, whatever. And they're like, it's okay. It'll all get worked out in the end. So I'm like, well.
Getting spiritually cuckolded, basically.
Pretty much.
Jeez, John.
Is that a bad word?
I mean, honestly.
I'm just feeling for your dad. That's all.
No,
right.
Seriously. And I never took the time. To feel. I didn't, because I was so like, remember how they told me I wasn't a covenant kid? So I was like, this is my time to shine as a covenant kid. I'm going to get sealed to my mom and stepdad. Yep. And I remember thinking about it. I'm like, who do I want to spend eternity with? My father or my stepdad? My stepdad.
Which makes you kind of choose, right?
Yeah.
Quite literally.
Kids shouldn't have to make that choice.
No, absolutely not. And so then I would rationalize, right? I would say, well, he's here with me. He's raising me. Okay. So, okay. Yeah. My stepdad and my mom. Okay. So I'm 18. I call my father and my father's like, what? You want to get sealed to that man and your mom and not, what about me? And I was like, but it's okay. They tell me it'll be okay in the end. And so he says, no, absolutely not. I don't give you permission for that. So I'm heartbroken. Everyone's sad. And then we look into it. We write the temple and they dig out some policy. I have no clue where it came from. I still remember the paper, and it said if an adult child wants to get sealed to her parents and doesn't have permission from the biological parent, she must wait until she's 21, but must be endowed. And I was like, that's the best news I've ever heard. I get to be endowed without marriage and without a mission. I was so excited. So I turned 21 and I get endowed, and I wait, by the way, 18 to 21, meaning that my little sister can't get sealed yet. And so she's like, wait, so you three are going to be sealed? My father's over here in Colombia being heartbroken and
she's left
chopped liver? Yeah. And we're like, yeah. And so, I mean, it was so many hurt feelings and so many unsaid things. I do remember my father's very quiet, my Colombian father, who I love so much. I talked to him on the phone when I was getting sealed, when I was 21.
How'd you break the news?
It was so sad. He said, okay, you're 21. What are you going to do? And I said, well, I just want to tell you I'm going through the temple. And he was like, I'm so happy, you know? And I said, because I'm getting sealed to my mom and to Mike. And he said, oh, is that what you've chosen then? And I said, yeah, but it doesn't mean I don't love you. And he said, oh, I know you love me. It just really, really hurts. And then he hung up. We didn't keep talking. It was kind of like, okay. And our relationship was not the same until, much later. But anyway, so that's how I got to go to the temple through that. But anyway, the stake president didn't want to give me a temple recommend though. He was really hesitant because he's like, are you going to go to the temple? And I'm like, yeah, I promise. And he said, usually if men go with their wives, it's easier. If wives go with men, it's easier. If companions go, but you're a single 21-year-old, I don't think you're going to go that often. So I'm hesitant to give it to you. So I kind of had to promise him there in his office before promising in the temple that I would go to the temple. So I got my recommend. I begged for it. I got it. I got sealed to my parents. Anyway, so I was endowed
Some
kind
of your parents.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No, seriously, without my sister, she just sat outside the temple. She was what?
I just have to make this sort of pause thing. That's just the church creates the scarcity. The selling point of Mormonism is the eternal family, but so often this teaching of the eternal family divides and even tears up families and causes so much pain by the manufactured scarcity of some being sealed and some not being sealed and some making it and some not. It's this dream that becomes a horror for so many people. I'm feeling for your biological dad. That's all.
Thank you.
I think this is sensitive to me because my parents got divorced. They got temple married, then divorced. And then my mom fell in love with her third husband. So then she broke the sealing and got sealed to my dad. And then I'm finding out as a BYU student that my parents' sealing was canceled. And then she gets married to her third husband. So then I'm, as a BYU student, like, well, who am I sealed to? Yeah. And it was I think I had to cancel a class because of the depression I felt. Wow. Learning that my eternal family, even though my parents were together, is still in my mind. I'm so, well, we're still sealed, and I don't know how to work in the afterlife, but at least I'm sealed because the church had created in me this need to be sealed to somebody. Yeah. You talk to regular Christians, they're like, everyone goes to heaven. Yeah. What's the deal? Everyone goes. God's not splitting up families and keeping families apart. But Mormonism, as a selling point, as a feature, creates this scarcity that then causes so much heartache. And I'm sure non-Mormon listeners are like, this is all sounds like hobbits and dwarves and,
And
you know,
Harry
like
Potter.
Harry Potter. But and they're like, wah, you know, but it is traumatic for those of us going through it.
Yeah. And you grow up with it. I mean, you grew up singing Families Can Be Together Forever.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, now that I'm older, I remember thinking, my poor father, he must have thought, they don't want me, right? It's not only, oh, we couldn't get sealed and then we got divorced. It's, you chose now to get sealed to someone else. I mean, how that must feel pretty terrible, but.
Yeah, I'm just working through, I'm thinking about, I was Mormon just 2 years ago. What if, okay, so let's say me and my husband got divorced. That's very sad, but we're still Mormon. What if he went off, moved to a different country, took our kids with him, married another Mormon woman? I'm still living my covenants. He's trying to live his covenants with a new woman, and my kids grow up to go be sealed to their stepmom. I would cry and never stop crying. Probably it would be really hard if I'm trying to like really empathize with how that would actually feel. If I'm trying to do my best to stay faithful in this gospel, and it's a strange allegiance that the church kind of muddies these waters sometimes. Yeah, it's problematic.
Yeah, and to feel. Yeah. Oh, sorry, but
at least just allow spiritual polyamory. Let everyone be sealed to everyone versus like. Have people have a kid have to choose. Yeah. A kid should never have to choose.
No. And to feel, parents. Yeah, and to be like, well, things will be worked out in heaven for your father. Then it's like, well, then why do I have to get sealed? Then they should be worked out in heaven this way too, right? Yeah. So then why do I have to make a choice?
Yeah.
You know, to give one excuse for one, but not for the other. I think that was hard. And for my sister, that was really hard for her, feeling like, great, now I also have to choose because my sister chose this, so what am I supposed to choose, right? And then
it's complicated.
Yeah, it got
I
super
thought that was
sticky.
a really rough time. Wow.
Yeah, it was, and she didn't really talk about it. It was kind of, that was expected, right? You're gonna join us, right? You're gonna join me and my mom and stepdad, right? And without taking her feelings into consideration, well, who do you want to be with? You're just gonna do what your sister does? Yep, you are. And so that was really complicated, and it did strain the relationship with my father and us.
How could it not?
So yeah, that was messy, but I got endowed, so I was just happy as a clam there because I was so, I needed to be so spiritual. So I went to the temple all the time. And then later on, my sister turned 21. She actually served her mission in Queens, New York. Cool. Which is crazy. She
was pretty exciting to open that, I bet, then. Wow.
Yeah.
Because her patriarchal blessing said she would serve a mission.
Yes.
Unlike yours.
Unlike mine. So she served her mission. She went right back to Queens. She went right to Richmond Hill 3. And isn't that crazy?
Really is that cute. Revelation, or did they just know that somehow?
I don't know. Huh. I have no clue. She was really sad, though. She's like, I don't want to go back to New York. I want to go somewhere else. But she met her husband there. So maybe it was revelation. But anyway. So
was he a missionary as well, or was he
was a missionary?
Okay.
Is she still in the church?
No.
Oh, okay.
No. So, we'll get. Okay. But she literally, right when she got home, we got sealed. The 4 of us.
Did another sealing.
We did. Yeah. And actually, no, it wasn't the 4 of us. It was her and them, because I sat there.
So double the wound to your dad. double the wound.
Right.
And that's interesting too, when you think about free agency is a beautiful concept, but not always played out so well in Mormonism, because what kind of free agency did your sister have to really get sealed? And the choice was kind of already made, because it's kind of pointless for all of you guys to get sealed if she's never going to join. She does have to kind of abandon her birth father to do that, right?
Mm-hmm, exactly.
It's difficult.
Yeah. Yeah. There's no choice there. She wasn't given an options.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway.
Brutal.
Yeah. But
brutal.
Here I am, seminary. So
let's do this. What I want to do, I want to have this first segment kind of a part 1.
Okay.
That's going to be maybe growing up as a Colombian immigrant, a Mormon immigrant, or something like that.
Yeah.
And then what I want to do is kind of say this will be the end of part 1.
Okay.
And then if it's okay, we'll take a break, and then we'll come back and we'll have the next part be being a female, Mormon woman of color in the CES system as kind of part 2. Yeah. How does that sound?
That sounds great.
Does that sound good?
Yeah, it's perfect.
Anything else you want to say to kind of close out your pre-CES life as a Mormon Colombian immigrant woman of color?
No, I think that was it. That temple ceiling thing was kind of the pinnacle of,
Mormonism.
Because everyone, the temple is the big one. And for me, it was the sealing too, abandoning one parent, joining the other two. That was how I got to go to the temple.
Mormon Mount Everest. You summited.
I summited.
Do you want to say anything about going through the temple? You said that you liked it and you went all the time.
I did.
So you must have had a good
The
experience.
actual endowment experience.
I did. Yeah, I did. I honestly, my mom did such a good job because she went, being not raised in Mormonism, I think it was easier for her to be like, oh yeah, the temple, I'm reverent. And yeah, I don't understand a word they said, but yeah. So I think, and later on, I mean, when I went, she had already been endowed for so many years. So when I was asking her what I could do to get ready, she's like, nothing. Just go maybe read these scriptures, but go and just feel the Spirit. So I did. And that's what I did. I did feel a little weird with certain parts of the endowment ceremony.
Do you mind sharing what parts or?
No, I don't. During the what is it? When you lift your hands in the air 3 times.
Yeah,
prayer
oh God,
hear the words in my mouth. I remember distinctly being like, something inside was like, but.
Because it felt what?
Because it felt weird. It felt weird to chant at the same time 3 times.
Raising your arms.
Raising your arm.
Them.
Yeah. Just nothing I'd ever done outside of the temple. Everything was weird. But I remember my mom telling me, she was like, it will feel weird, but don't worry, it's all part of the sacred ceremony. So I never questioned it. But hearing myself out loud 3 times with my hands in the air, that was the first time that I was like, But again, you took it very deep. So I didn't think anything of it. But yeah, that's about it. I liked it. I did not like the endowment though as much. If you have preferences, initiatory.
Yeah, initiatories.
You preferred.
Yeah. I preferred it, yeah. And then you could go, I don't know if anyone knew this. My mom told me this when she worked at the temple, so I always did it and no one knew. But you go to the initiatories and then you put on your temple dress and you go to the celestial room. You don't have to go through an endowment to get to the celestial room. So that was kind of my go-to all the time.
I did that with sealings too. Kind of like a quick and dirty now.
Into the celestial room.
Yeah, you just you want to shortcut to the celestial room.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of, it feels good to be in a quiet meditative place.
Yeah.
And the movie and a lot of the chanting can drag on.
Exactly. And you're hungry. Yeah. So you do. Yeah. But you're not allowed to. I pulled out my patriarchal blessing and I was told to put it away. So I was like, I want to be in the
celestial room.
Yeah, in the celestial room.
Too. Yeah, I was really shocked. I wasn't allowed to write in my journal sitting in the chapel area when you're looking at the baptismal font. I had my scriptures in my journal out, and they told me to put them away. And you're not allowed to have any outside information, even your patriarchal blessing. I was really surprised by that.
Yeah, I was like, but I want inspiration in the temple.
Gotta memorize it.
Yep. Right. But yeah, that's all with the temple. I loved it. It meant a lot to me coming from a family who couldn't have it in their lives. So I really was committed to it.
That's really, there's a lot of beauty in that. So yeah, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, thank you.
I like hearing, good kind of temple experiences. And so.
Yeah.
All right. So you summited as a Mormon.
I did.
You found your man.
I did.
And you found your life calling, being in CES.
Yep. Being in seminary. Yep. I did.
All right. So is that it for the part 1?
That's it. Yeah.
All right. So stay tuned, everyone, because you ain't seen nothing yet. This is just the beginning. Part 2 is going to be what it was like for Laura Schnell to be a woman of color, immigrant, non-return missionary, Mormon, joining CES as a married woman and navigating all of that with Marc Oslund. That's going to be part 2. So just tune right back in for part 2 of this amazing interview with Laura Schnell. Thanks, Kara.
Thanks, John. Thanks, Laura. See you guys in a minute.
All right, Laura.
All right.